Game begin.
All right. Hello and welcome to episode 40 of the Spy Colony podcast. I am here with 45% gamer, 50-something percent gamer, Michael J. Flores.
Excuse me? Just because one chooses the rock doesn't mean that one takes on the rock's win rate.
That is true.
You quoted the average win rate of a blue-white player to me, not my win rate.
Okay, so I have a correction.
To be clear,
so
I lost playing for day 2 in game 3 of round 9, which is the worst possible outcome, which I guess is worse than a 45% win rate, but it's like a 70% win rate.
I guess for the background, Michael J wasn't here with us last week because he was playing in the Contemporary Magic RC. The format was standard. Standard actually does currently have the rock deck in the metagame, and the rock deck in the standard metagame is indeed black-green, and its win rate is indeed roughly 45%. Mike elected to go with blue-white the rock, which after everything shook out, I believe it actually ended up with like a 51.7% win rate. So
but
it was
my personal
not
win rate is a good deal better.
Yeah. It's not. I mean, 5. What's 5 over 9? It's only 0.55.
Yeah,
it's
still better.
3%.
Still better, MFer. You know, in hindsight, I should have just played like red green or something. It's weird because
in hindsight, you should have just played this 5-color Legends deck, right?
Oh no, that's not. First of all, that's not for me. Second of all, I don't. Well, I think like the red green deck won the tournament, and also that's very much my style. Not that we believe in style, right? We believe in force and leverage, but if you want to talk about,
I mean, I believe in style until it's a detriment to yourself, right? Like it'd be ridiculous to tell Reed Duke to play, all in combo.
So, I think the problem that we had is I think we were too early, and too early is the same as just being wrong. Like Roman and I had figured out like the optimal versions of blue-white like weeks ago, which is bad, but that just means we gave the rest of the world time to catch up, and then like
it ended up being the most popular deck of the
then we had
weekend.
no edge anymore.
Yeah.
Right, like that's actually the problem. Like versus. Like we were very good against mono red and red green, and especially I was, right. My sideboard strat was still ahead of the curve, but not enough. Like I lost to red. It was one of my losses in day 1, and I also lost to Teamer. And those are two like probably my 2 best matches. It just just happens, man. You can't script them all. I lost 3 I must have lost 4 matches if I didn't make day 2. I lost to not drawing Memory Day Illusion, the sideboarded game. That So you're still shuffling cards.
That is true. I mean, I think it's too hard to transpose for like the contemporary Magic atmosphere. I certainly don't know enough about this blue-white control deck. I can only just point and laugh and be like, haha, land still sucks. Go figure. But proud of you for qualifying, proud of you for still having the fire and getting out there and putting yourself out there. We had a great time talking about week 1 of the PSS. This week we took off because of Michael J. Hoyp's comedy show. So all of us PSS competitors are recording our matches, and you will see those streamed and commented. We've been also in other news. We've been doing Spy Colony for a year, so that's pretty fun. That's a pretty fun milestone for us. And outside of that, I just kind of like, I don't know, 45% decks. It feels like it's an inescapable trend. I think
For me.
well, it's just like everyone falls into this with Magic, right? Which is why I think it's like a relevant topic because there's still this black-green deck still exists. It's like it just seems like every Magic format in like.
You mean in Standard?
Yeah, it exists. In Standard.
Reed Duke made that deck, and that deck didn't exist prior to the Pro Tour, right?
Oh well, there you go.
Yeah, Reed Duke made it, and like the Golgari didn't exist really as a archetype. I guess it did. People were playing like the Tortoise deck or whatever, the previous Pro Tour. But as it stands right now with Broncos and like its ability to grind out blue-white instead of just being completely blown over by control elements, that was created by Reed. It's played by Reed and Matt Sperling at the last Pro Tour, and it has all kinds of features that a pre-modern audience wouldn't. I could just rattle off some of the features of it, and people would be like, I don't know what those cards are.
I mean, that's true, but
Broncos, not deep cavern bats.
If I pull out the grid, I'm pretty sure I'm going to find that it's got roughly a 45% win rate. So everything changes, and yet it all stays the same. But it does make me wonder what, like. It's so interesting to me because I think one of the things that that I've commented was just like, okay, well, we've talked about it before. If you think that you're a strong player, you think that you're stronger than your opponent, you play a deck that just makes the game longer and allows your opponent to make more mistakes than you, and then you just win by virtue of like just staying alive for another turn and waiting for your opponent to do something bad.
Okay, all things held equal, at equilibrium, a 45% win rate's not that bad. It's actually pretty good. If you think about it, like in a perfect world, at equilibrium, everything's 50%, right? 45% isn't so far. But what ends up happening is that there's some decks that are disproportionately super high percent, like 70+%, 90% win rate, and they have to eke their win rate out from all the 5% that are not happening because the format's not at equilibrium, and those tend to be clustered in decks that are very low population. Like if you look at LobsterCon 2022 rather than 2023, where Landstill was the winning deck. Even if you look at 2023, the win rate on Fluctuator was like 90%, right, on one pilot. And the previous year, the win rate on like Angry Hermit, the win rate on Replenish were super disproportionate relative to the field. So they were borrowing a lot of the Rock's win rate for that tournament, because like over the course of everything's 50%, right? Like that's
the average win rate of a deck,
of a tournament,
But I mean, it's in mathematics, it's just the dance partners thing. So
45% isn't really that bad for a deck at scale.
Well, I tend to agree. However, it does beg the question of if any high population 45% winner is going to basically just be in a survivorship bias situation. So you look at these decks that have really high populations, and you go in there, and that's the fundamental issue, right?
Yeah, if
you go in with the Rock and you think to yourself, I am going to be the Rock player that succeeds where every Rock player has failed. And by the end of the tournament, you're like, okay,
you're not that person.
I got unlucky.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to dwell on this too long, but if you look at it, Scam won the Modern Pro Tour earlier this year, and then in the past, like decks like Elves and Fairies have won large-scale Pro Tours, and that didn't change the fact that the average win rate of those decks was about 40%, because they're just highly played. Highly played decks tend to have below-average win rates. So
you know this. So you know this is a fact.
Yes, that is literally a fact.
And you know then that any winning player thus does have survivorship bias and is going to trick themselves into thinking that one of these high population decks are good decks, and yet despite all this, we look at our lineup and it's Burn in the Rock, and you would play Burn or the Rock in a big, like you would play Burn or the Rock in LobsterCon probably, right?
I'm probably going to play Burn this year because Tom Metelsky already tricked me into saying that I'm like the burn god or whatever. He's like, oh, Mike's the burn god. Don't let him be tricked into playing anything else. I'm like, as you know, even one drop of flattery
it just sets the
completely derail my deck choice.
And it's
Zach Hill did it to me once.
He didn't
play the same deck as me at that game.
I mean, you just get heckin' bamboozled at every turn. I mean, I
all you got to do is give me one drop of flattery and I'll
I mean,
yes, and I designed this. I am the burn god, as you said.
three Urza's bubble.
There's no other way to.
Yeah, there's going to be a burn.
It.
There will be a burn deck in the top 8 of LobsterCon this year. The question is,
might be me.
How many Urza's bubble are there going to be?
There's also going to be like 90 smoldering craters of bodies lying around in the Swiss, like to get to that one in the. Would a BK say? You need 60 matches with the Rock before you get your 45%.
Before you realize your win rate. I mean, absolutely. Like, I think, like, I guess I just like don't know because
BK's also a Rock guy, so that's actually really a strange statement.
I mean, at this point, he's just going with the flow, right? He's not gonna. It's not like he's out there campaigning for the Rock because he's experienced it too. It's not like he's on a tear, right? If BK was winning every tournament with the Rock, then he could just be like, "Oh, you guys don't understand. Like, you don't play the deck correctly. Like." That's
How
something.
do you play Mesmeric Fiend into
Pernicious Deed correctly? You can't.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you activate the Pernicious Deed before casting Mesmeric Fiend is the answer.
I'm trying to make my house more palatable.
I encountered this because I recently took Alvaro's Contamination deck for a spin, and I sort of knew immediately, like I knew looking at the deck, I was just like, if this deck's good, like I'm not going to be the person to make it good, like to make it look good. And then
it does not seem good. I watched that video. I mean, you did also not play great, but like, I mean, just I want to rescue you from whatever wrong statements you're about to make. If you need to be rescued by zombie infestation in a deck that generates essentially no value with zombie infestation, that's tough, man. That's you know how I feel about analogies. You're like, well, the only way I can get out of this situation is by strangling my opponent with the handcuffs that I'm in. I mean, that's tough. You know, not only do you have to be in handcuffs to begin with, but they have had to have put the handcuffs on you wrong. Like, both of those conditions had to have been fulfilled. Otherwise, you can't complete the side quest. You know.
I mean, I think that so like I played the league to a 3-3. I probably should have gone at least like 5-1, right? If I just like didn't.
I don't know how you think you should go on 5-1. You made a mistake against the black-white deck. The other stuff, I don't know that you.
No, I lost on a turn, like a 1-turn differential against Grotog when I.
Yeah, like, one of your wins was the mirror match against somebody who was tapped.
Yeah, okay. So then we'll remove that from the data. Then it would be like a 4-1 result. But I think a 4-1 goblins and burn. You know, I like beat the red decks.
I went to go build the deck. I actually do own 4 Nether Spirits. I couldn't find any contaminations, so I wanted to. I was just like, what kind of I'm often asking myself this question of like, what kind of person am I? Like, am I a generous person? Am I a good person? I think that you get introspective in this way when you get to be a certain age. And I'm always like, what kind of person am I? And I'm like, I'm the kind of person that sees a deck that I think Rebel will like, because it has like unmask and like weird free spell interactions. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go spend the next several hours building this deck by combing through my cards.
Well, Rebel just likes black mid-range decks. So
but I couldn't find any contaminations. So I set aside the cards that I could find. And then
you just use Blood Moons as proxies for contamination, right?
Well, how expensive is contamination? Maybe when I'm done with my current adventures, I'll go order some. That was what my... Then it's fine because then I'll have a 12th deck for the box.
I think they're I think they're weirdly expensive.
Let's look.
$11.
$11. Are they gonna? The list and it's Urza's Saga. I must own this if it's Urza's Saga.
I mean, last
pick
rare.
Yeah, but I have like 14 Gaia's Cradles and like 11 Tolarian Academies. How can I not own Contamination if it's Urza's Saga?
Are they in the Ancestral Home? I mean, regardless, I think that
maybe they are.
I think that there's some, like, don't get me wrong. If I built the deck, I would build it entirely different. But when
you just add a color,
I would add a color. Yeah, I'd play
Which color? Red.
I would play Call of the Herd. I'd add red and green.
Red and green?
Yeah, why not?
Tainted style?
No, because So
I think Tainted Style is good because it's
well.
good
Then
at
you have to
Tainted
cut
Pact.
all the the utility lands. You have to cut all the Mishras and the Rishon
Nah.
import.
Just don't worry about it.
You get the full fetch package. You get all 8 fetches, and then you can
You want to play Wooded Foothills?
you can play Call the Herd. Yeah, just play Wood Foothills.
How many? One?
They gas up your skeletal scrying. Just don't worry about
No
don't worry
way,
about the
man.
rest.
That's way worse than Tainted Style.
I mean,
Also,
you have to play like the deck contains like 20 lands. You have to run you have to run like 14 swamps and then 8 tainted lands. That's already 22 lands, and then you need to run
Dog.
what?
Your fetch lands approximate some of them, and then separately, your like Tainted Pacts approximate some of them. But the thing that you can't cut the Mishras. Like I texted you while I was watching the video, and I'm like, why didn't you just activate your Mishras Factory? Like, why didn't you just play Contamination on turn 3, activate Mishras Factory, eat the Contamination with the Mishras Factory, and then hardcast the Nether Spirit the next turn? Like, that was like a super obvious line to me.
Yeah, I just didn't want to run into Disenchant. Like I was playing,
How could you run into Disenchant? It can't be cast under Contamination.
They just float the white in response to Contamination.
It would never happen.
I mean, it would happen some of the times. It wouldn't happen It wouldn't happen 0% time.
They don't.
But
if there's one thing that I've learned in 30 years of competitive Magic is they don't have it.
They don't have it. Yeah, fair enough. It's gotten you this far. It's gotten you to game 3 of round 9.
I mean, and I was up. The thing was, I won game 1. I played through as Liliana, and like, I mean, this kid was like, he died in his chair. He was like straight up like, he wins the roll. Liliana locks me, and I played out of it. And he's just like, oh my god, I can't win that. And then I had all my sweepers in, and I drew 1 sweeper and 1.
You lost round 9 to black midrange deck. You lost round 9 landstill against the Rock.
I drew 1 sweeper and 1 memory delusion the last 2 games.
All right.
If I had drawn, I think 1 of each in the last 2 games, I would have won both.
No shit factor fiction for those listening at home. The card memory deluge.
It's a very good factor fiction.
It's just factor fiction that you get to cast twice. It's awesome.
It's a flashback factor fiction. It's awesome. And then you guys know what a sweeper is, except for the ones that I played all exile instead of destroy.
Anyways, I think the Contamination deck warrants more interest. I definitely don't like. I sort of like. It's incredible how quickly this deck gets to 0 cards in hand. It's just like I thought like regular mono black decks like Dark Ritualing.
That is not a feature.
I
Wait a minute, guys.
I was like,
wait a minute.
Like the entire crusade of mono black deck was just like Swamp Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre, Nantuko Shade, Pit Rack, or not like whatever, not Bottomless Pit. Like those.
Yeah, but you don't take them with you.
You don't. Yeah.
Right? Like the thing is, like those decks, like we're both just idiots, but now we're both playing off the top. YOLO! But you're just like, I'm at 0 cards.
I won the game where I played Contamination on turn 3 and then unmasked targeting myself, pitching Nether Spirit. I put my entire hand into the graveyard.
There are cool lines where you have to use your zombie infestation to get the Nether Spirit into the graveyard. Like, that's kind of cool. But like the fact that you need your zombie infestation to create pressure is really, really bad.
But it's actually okay. So don't get me wrong. Like the moment that you start evaluating this deck on rate, it just doesn't work, right? Because
every deck could be evaluated on rate,
right? But that it just like I don't know. The Fluctuator deck is like really bad on rate, right? But
I don't think so.
I mean, regardless, I'm just saying.
I spend 3 total mana and I do 20 damage. That's a lot of rate.
Well, that's the rate on the deck, but the rate on the individual cards. Like if you want to judge the rate on the deck for the Contamination deck, you can say the same thing. You can be like, well, if I have all 60 cards in hand, then that's 30 zombies.
Well,
but let me finish the point. The moment you start evaluating this deck on rate, you're not going to succeed. The deck just exists in this like weird different universe, which is just that like, okay, like it plays towards the end point of having Contamination in play, and once you have Contamination in play,
they're mind twisted.
Well, yeah, Zombie Infestation is no longer horrible value; it's infinite value. And in fact, it's one of the only ways to generate value in the color black that's sort of persistent, right? So if you have zombie infestation,
generating value. Let's not use the term generating value because that is not what it is doing.
Well, okay, let me clarify for the audience at home. So the Contamination deck is a mono black deck that aims to put Contamination and Nether Spirit together to lock your opponent, who presumably has not made the folly of playing black cards in their deck, out of the game from casting cards for the rest of the game. Now, there are some unfortunate problems with this plan. The problem number one is that Contamination Nether Spirit is only a lock. You need to do something else to actually win the game, because
it's also
every turn,
not quite a lock.
I'll get there.
It is lockish.
Every turn, you're going to get a 2/2. You're going to lose the 2/2. So if by turn 3 your sinister opponent has put any number of creatures onto the battlefield, you're going to need to make sure that those are dead, because your 2/2 that keeps coming back won't be around to block.
Like 2 Mistress Factories also beats you up pretty bad.
Yeah. You really don't want to be up against your opponent's Mistress Factory, so you play your own factories, you play Wastelands, and you play Rishin Import. You play the full, you play like a full 12 utility lands. That's thing number one.
Package is what you've got.
So that's thing number one. So thing number two is the way your opponent gets around this is if they have any non-land mana sources, because Contamination only stops your opponent's only lands from producing mana. And then also if they have their own Mistress Factory, they can still activate Mistress Factory. Of course, if your opponent's deck contains black cards, they can use their black cards to play a fair game with you. So
they full on operate under a Mox, right? If they've got a Mox, their life is fine.
Yeah. And then the idea of this deck is that you're like, okay, well, I'm going to sideboard in these no rods. They're going to stop your Phyrexian Furnace, stop your Tormod's Crypt. So this comes with a lot of problems, and the solutions for the deck tend to be in the form of second order solutions, which is like, if you're going to stop me this way, I'm going to stop you this way. So in that way, it really functions like a prison deck or a combo deck, however you want to conceptualize these things. So why is Zombie Infestation a playable card in this deck? Well, one, the machinery of this deck is not useful in multiple copies. Once you play your first Contamination, your second Contamination is not going to help you do anything. Once you play your first...
What if your black-white opponent floated a white?
Yeah, that's...
Aha! The second Contamination is just fine.
Let me continue, please. Thing number two, your second zombie infestation itself also doesn't do anything. Your second Nether Spirit is bad. In fact, like, you don't want that anywhere near the graveyard unless you have your own cleanup for it. You have 4 duress for Cabal Therapy if your opponent is empty-handed, or you have the lock in place. So this deck generates a lot of this dead weight. And then, of course, like, if your deck contains creature removal, your opponent's not presenting creatures, you want to get rid of the creature removal. So what Zombie Infestation does is that over, like, the long scale of the game that you're going to be playing, after you have the Contamination lock in place, it's possible that your opponent is going to be drawing towards their very, very low number of outs. Even against a Mox Diamond deck, they do have to draw a Mox Diamond before they're dead if they're under Contamination. And you could see this kind of happening in a game I played against Grotog, where I duressed and Cabal Therapied to go after the Mox Diamond that was in my opponent's hand, and my opponent had to trade a foil, an island, and a card to protect a Mox Diamond, which they would then pitch another card to, because again, the rules of the game had changed at that point, where we're no longer concerned about things like rates and whether or not our cards generate value, and all we were concerned with was, like, is Contamination going to be on the battlefield? And once it's on the battlefield, am I going to be doing anything about it? So, like, any game where I drew Contamination, I really also wanted Nether Spirit, of course, but I really also wanted Zombie Infestation, because this was one card that was going to make it such that every single card I drew off my deck would contribute to me pulling ahead and getting to a place where my opponent wouldn't bring things back to parity. So in that way, and I actually, and this is the part that I think that makes the deck designed really well. I thought it was really good. Now, the things that I don't like is that you're playing this Mono Black deck with just 2 Sylvan Scrying, 2 Tainted Pact, 4 Contamination, and 4 Nether Spirit. I just like never saw the 2 cards together. And then it's like if my opponent just like I have to like stop my opponent from having a battlefield and killing me or having their own mission.
What if they have a duress? Did you play against anyone with a duress?
I played against the black-white deck, which runs Duress and Gerard's Verdict, right? Gerard's Verdict is horrible against me because I want to discard my cards anyways because they're so bad. But Duress, of course, for Contamination was good. So, but I just want to point that out because, like, I think when we first were like, oh, what's this Mono Black Contamination deck? It's like, oh, you play this card Zombie Infestation, and so you, like, pay 1 and a B, and then you cost you a card, and then it costs you 2 more cards. So at the cost of 3 cards and 1 and a B, you've made your first zombie.
You now have. So think about this from a different perspective. A Grizzly Bears costs 1 and a G. This is the cost of a Grizzly Bears and 2 additional cards for your first Grizzly Bear. But it's all right. You don't have to invest any more Grizzly Bear mana. You just have to invest 2 cards at a time to get your second Grizzly Bear. Now, typically, when you play this card, you play it in decks with like Upheaval or Squee Goblin Nabob, which would give you ways to generate value, which is a thing you were talking about earlier. This deck doesn't generate value. It just throws shit into the graveyard.
But I think it's important to note that the deck at least changes the concepts. Like, once you actually play the games, you're just like, okay, I need the Zombie Infestation card to
combo decks and lock decks often are filled with bad cards.
Yeah, that's
and they can be good decks despite being filled with bad cards. But this one has
a preponderance of bad cards. It's actually crazy because it's a mono black deck, so it only has the worst color cards in Fremont.
Can't we do better than Sick as Hell Dreams? I mean, like, Sick as Hell Dreams is cool, but it's a terrible top deck.
Oh, it's just it's not good. You never have the cards to discard to it, which is like problem number 1. And then you also don't have the life. Like, you don't want to deal damage to yourself.
Yeah, the fact that it damages you is... I'm just saying, I feel like we could do better than Sick as Hell Dreams.
Yeah. Well, it's a relatively new... I mean, the list is at least in its, in its, like, cooking phase, right? So, like
Sickening Dreams, 4 Zombie Infestation, and... There's probably more cards in this ilk that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, all in the same deck. Just means that you're not going to be able to play your cards quite often.
Yeah, no. I mean, this deck doesn't cast its cards. It just ditches them
off. No, I said play your cards.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Forget about cast your cards.
It doesn't play. No, it doesn't play them either. If it's a land,
you're still
it's just
cards.
It's just like, okay, phase 1 of the game is like Duress, Cabal Therapy, Innocent Blood removal, keep the board clear. Phase 2 of the game is Zombie Infestation, Contamination, Nether Spirit, like nothing I draw. Like, if your opponent, I forgot like what spot I was in, but like I was just like getting wastelanded and or some, I don't know, something was happening and I was just like, none of this matters. Like, I no longer need to cast my spells. Like, every single card I draw from now on is going to be half of a 2/2 zombie, and that's just the magic that we're in. And like, the best thing that I can do is if like I draw a card like Smother or or not even Contagion, right? Unless, of course, I get my opponent's like running out 2/2/1s or whatever. But like, the best my deck is going to give me is half of a 2/2, and like from that perspective, it works. Like, is it the best deck in pre-modern? Is it like a
Let's say you have the lock in place. You have a Nether Spirit and a Contamination in play. Your Nether Spirit's in the graveyard. You bring it back. It's on your upkeep. You bring it back. Contamination is on the stack. Can I? As we've established on this podcast, that I don't really understand how the stack works. Contamination is on the stack. If I word to your Smother the Nether Spirit before you've resolved sacrificing to Contamination, does your Contamination now go away?
So let me...
Is that a thing that
let me explain to you how the rules work so that you have a more holistic understanding of things that happen. So there's 2 important concepts here. The first is the concept of intervening if triggers. So this is very important in pre-modern, namely with the card Oath of Druids, but it also applies to the card Nether Spirit. So your opponent passes priority on their end step, you pass priority back, you begin your turn. So you begin your turn, you go into your upkeep phase. If Nether Spirit's the only creature in your graveyard, a trigger goes on the stack that says, return Nether Spirit to play.
Can I interrupt you for a second? So, but you have it's your turn, so you can put these on the stack in the order.
Yeah,
that's
the second
right?
thing. That's the second thing.
You put contamination on the stack, and then you put the conditional stack opportunity.
Let me explain the two things that are happening, and then explain how they interact with each other. Because in your situation, you asked me a question about using a card to interact with this.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to cover here and a lot of ways to interact with the deck here. So let's just go back to where we are, which is that we have one Nether Spirit in the graveyard. And it's our upkeep, and we have a trigger on the stack. So if I have one Nether Spirit in the graveyard and the trigger gets put on the stack, it says, if Nether Spirit is the only creature in your graveyard, return it to the battlefield. And I have a Nether Spirit in play, and your opponent has a smother. Your opponent can simply smother the Nether Spirit in response to the Nether Spirits in the graveyard to put two Nether Spirits into the graveyard. At this point, there's going to be a trigger still on the stack that says, if Nether Spirit's the only creature in your graveyard. So it's an intervening if, which means that the condition must be satisfied in order for the trigger to be put on the stack and for it to resolve. So the trigger is then going to look at your graveyard and say, well, you have Nether Spirit is not the only creature in your graveyard, so then it'll fizzle. So now let's add contamination to the mix. So the other thing which you astutely pointed out, which is that the active player gets to put their triggers on the stack in the order that they wish. So the correct way to do this with the contamination deck is to place the contamination trigger that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, onto the stack. And then on top of that, you place your Nether Spirit return trigger on the stack so that you get another Spirit. And then the contamination asks you to sacrifice a creature, and then you sacrifice the creature. You keep your contamination. Nether Spirit goes back to the graveyard. So if you have a smother in your deck because you're playing black cards, you don't need your opponent to have two Nether Spirits in play. What you can just simply do is just let them resolve the Nether Spirit trigger. The Nether Spirit enters the battlefield. You smother the Nether Spirit, and then the contamination trigger is still on the stack, and then you just wait for them to sacrifice something, but they have nothing. Whether or not they have two Nether Spirits is irrelevant. Now, if they do have two Nether Spirits and there's not a contamination in the mix, or you want to get some extra value, the correct timing would be, of course, smother the Nether Spirit that's on the battlefield while the graveyard Nether Spirit's trigger is on the stack, so that the if isn't satisfied, and then your opponent would then need to be ready with a skeletal scrying or a cremate or some other technology to try to get their graveyard in a state such that Nether Spirit's the only creature again.
When I played Nether Spirit in Standard, I thought that I was really clever to play cremate, and that cremate was like a black opt. But it's just better in pre-modern to play Phyrexian Furnace, I think, right? Where you just target your own Nether Spirit.
Well, you see, because this deck is so fixated on this contamination plan and effectively plays the contamination plan against every single deck except for Mono Black, it sideboards in Norrod to prevent your opponent from using Phyrexian Furnaces, Mox Diamonds, or Tormod's Crypts to disrupt your Nether Spirit. So once again, you're back to wanting to use the card Cremate.
I did find
Skeletal Scrying
to be pretty cool.
Yeah,
that. I thought I watched your video and I was taking some test draws with the Bungo cards that I had, and I found that to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that you can draw 4 is pretty powerful.
Oh no, I mean just to remove a Nether Spirit.
Oh, just to remove, yeah.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah. I mean, if it were me, I would take everything that I liked about the deck and then try to remove the things that I don't. I would look for.
But the things you don't like is a solid 25% of the cards, right?
I like.
Dreams.
I like Duress. I don't like Cabal Therapy. I don't like Sickening Dreams. I don't like Contagion. I don't like Unmask. And
see, the Contagion, Unmask, etc. I thought those would be the attractive elements of the deck for some people. Like the free spell aspect.
Yeah. I mean, I like the concept of you can spend all your mana using Rishon and Port, or just not playing lands, right? You're you don't want to play lands because your lands can become half of a 2/2 zombie later. So you pretty much just want to go swamp, Port, Mishra's Factory, and then contamination, infestation, contamination, and then you just like don't want to play lands for the rest of the game. But sometimes you draw like your redundant Nether Spirit, and you can't pitch it to infestation, so you have to exile.
What you're saying is that this deck is basically Groatog. So I should just think about this deck as Groatog.
It depends on how good you are at transposing principles from one deck to another, because effectively,
I think this deck is way more Groatog than Landstill is the Rock, and that doesn't stop you from calling Landstill the Rock every week.
I mean, I accept this. I accept
like this is way more Groatog.
Yeah, I mean, either way, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like if we run enough Cremate and Skeletal Scrying, we can also
we're even talking about different kinds of Opt and Gush right now.
Oh my god!
Well, we've got this kind of Opt.
You know how much I hate
this Gush
Opt,
is only good in this case.
But I think if we run enough Cremate and Skeletal Scrying, we can simply play other creatures. We
can simply play Groatog.
Yeah, like Psychotog, which also exiles cards from your graveyard to make your Nether Spirit come back.
Now that Rotting Giant is in Groatog, we just add Rotting Giant to this deck.
I mean, Rotting Giant cleans up other Rotting Giants so that you can bring back Nether Spirit. It's perfect.
This deck, I mean, Rotting Giant is better than like a good 75% of the cards in this deck.
Rotting Giant's better than a good 75% of the creatures played in pre-modern. Rotting Giant is like sick.
Yeah, so I'm saying this deck is Groatog.
I mean, the problem is Rotting Giant turns off your Skeletal Scrying, right? It makes your Skeletal Scryings worse. Like, if your plan is to be attacking with Rotting Giant a lot. But
what if we made our Skeletal Scryings better so that we can make our Rotting Giants functional? Maybe we'd be up ahead. Like, maybe instead of playing 2 Bloodstained Mire, we played 4 Bloodstained Mire. Instead of playing 2 Polluted Delta, we played 4 Polluted Delta. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up off the top of my head.
Maybe we just play Mental Note. Maybe we just play Factor Fiction. Factor Fiction? Oh no, I hit 2 Nether Spirits. It's okay.
Yeah, like
Skeletal Scrying for 4.
Is there a reason the deck has to be mono black other than it's a contamination lock deck?
I don't think that there is.
Like,
so
I think that the optimal number of zombie infestations is probably 2, and I could throw whatever colored cards that I had away. Like, that's the way I'd look at it.
I mean,
like,
how many ways to clean up our graveyard would we need to like make just playing Nether Spirit for value good? And then how like what our deck look like if we just played Contamination for tempo? Like, can we just play a deck that like just puts Contamination on the battlefield and only needs 5 turns to kill your opponent instead of 20?
Like, let's say we went the Brian Hacker 1996 route and we played attacking creatures and we played what's the name of the card? Black 1, destroy target land. If it's non-basic, they take 2. There's a famous.
It's
Choking Sands.
Choking Sands. Yeah.
There's a famous story of Brian Hacker going to the draft tables and looking at the draft chaff to find Choking Sands because he didn't own any, and he went undefeated on day 1 of the Pro Tour with his Choking Sands tempo deck, and like he didn't have any. He didn't figure to bring them. It was like a night before the tournament.
All right, so
brew.
So we got Choking Sands.
I'm saying Choking Sands is better.
We have Rancid Earth. We have Sheer Resistance. Maybe we have Oath of Druids and Terravore and Wasteland and Port because we're already a Wasteland Port Vicious Factory
Choking
deck.
Sands is better for a tempo perspective in the way that you're talking about.
It's better than Contamination.
Than Contamination is for the purpose that you're saying.
But we're already we're already an exciting Nether Spirit deck. Like, the point is like
no, we're not. It is not an exciting deck.
We're already in the door with Nether Spirit because Nether Spirit, if you think about it, is basically Oath of Druids, right? Except for the Oath of Druids only makes a 2/2.
No, it's not.
Like, this is how hard Black has to work to do good things, okay? First, my deck needs to contain no creatures, and then I need to pay BB1, and then my 2/2 neither gains life nor pyroclasms.
This is a pretty cool lock deck, okay? I actually think it's a pretty cool lock deck. It's a pretty cool lock combo. You have to treat it as such. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to make this a tempo deck. I'm going to treat this like an Oath deck. It is what it is. It's its own thing, and I think you have to lean into that and celebrate that. When you try to make it other things is when you get in the situation that like a Choking Sands is better.
All right, okay.
Right? Like, Choking Sands is not better than the full-on Contamination.
Then at least let's just play Call the Herd, right?
You just want to play...
Call the Herd is perfect here because it's not a creature. It's just ideal. Like,
You
Call the
love
Herd
Call
would
the
be
Herd.
insane in this deck.
You love Call of the Herd because it always beats you.
It would Call the Herd would have solved all of my problems. Every single game, goblins, blue-white flippy, black-white
Did
control.
you lose to Blue-White Flippy? That seems like an ideal matchup for this deck.
But I lost on a blunder. I lost on like an arguable blunder because I kind of forgot that Contagion. So like they got an Exalted Angel onto the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, I lose. But then I realized that Contamination puts counters on instead of
Contagion.
Contagion puts -2, -1 counters. So like it just didn't occur to me that I would
that it could not deal any damage.
yeah, that I would just like Contagion the Angel,
I
and then
see.
and then what's even better is that I would have just induced a block that turn, right? So I could have just like attacked with a bunch of zombies, induced a block, and then just like Contagion the Angel, and then it would have died. So I had 2 lines available. One is to pass the turn, allow an Angel attack, and then counterattack after Contagioning the Angel, and the other was to induce a block. I chose neither of those lines. Instead, I Contagion.
You chose just like take 4 to the face.
I don't know. I
I
did something hilariously bad. I just wasn't. I just didn't I was just so I was visibly uncomfortable playing the deck. I was just I do not know what the.
This
fuck
is
I'm
very
doing.
similar to what you said. Oh, maybe I should have learned this 5-color Legends deck or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have had time to master it, which is the reason that I rejected that thought process. Like for example, there's just lines to win that if you're not a master of the deck, you don't know that they exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like this deck has this card Slogurk the Overslime, and if you have one Takanuma.
Yeah, Slogurk the Overslime contains more lines of text than every pre-modern card combined.
But you could flip over a Jace the Perfected Mind with it, and the fact that you did it with a Takanuma implies that your opponent needs 3 hard counters or they'll lose in the next 3 turns. The average person doesn't know that, right? So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been really good on the other side of the table. But there's a lot of lines like that in the deck, and I think that it's probably similar in the Contamination deck. There's just a lot of intricacies.
Yeah. But I mean, for what it's worth,
2 -1 -2 -1 counters, for example.
But for what it's worth, I played the matches, identified the mistakes pretty shortly after the matches. Conceivably, if I ran it back, I want to give one of the things that I have I know that I do in pre-modern is that I look at a deck and somebody's just I'm playing this deck and I'm winning, and I look at it and then I'm just okay, I think that there are explanations for this besides the deck is good, right? That either you're getting
integrate
good,
before you innovate.
I mean, I just look at these decks and I'm just okay, clearly you're just getting lucky, or clearly your opponents don't bring good deck, or I'll just be none of your opponents are playing blue-white Dreadnought or something like that, we say that all the time.
I often have those, but I'm just saying if you're going to try the deck, you have to integrate before you innovate.
No,
you can't just make sometimes you'll be I'm playing Landy Hoth, but I made the following 16 changes because I don't like mulch.
No, I trade, but this is actually, thank you for teeing up that segue, because we had once again another Memorial Day barbecue at Casa del Lanny. And Lan had watched my video, and he basically said, you clearly play this deck much, much different than I do, and you also made changes that make sense for how you play the deck. And I tried same 75 to what Lan was doing. I tried test games, and I did exactly what you said. I was just okay, well, I want to make some changes to the deck first, so after giving it a spin. So the Contamination thing, this, I did the exact same thing. I was I'm going to play the exact 75. Now granted, I'm playing McLean 75, so Alvaro 75 might be slightly different from what McLean is doing, but I think they're pretty much the same as each other, with I think McLean had 2, the biggest thing is I think Alvaro, and I'm going to confirm, Alvaro has so both players have 2 skeletal scrying, and then Alvaro doesn't have fetch lands, but I'm looking at the list now. You
definitely have to have fetch lands. That's one
the
of
fetch
the
lands are
by
awesome.
zeros.
Yeah. The fetch lands are super great because they gas up your Tainted Pact and your skeletal scrying, so those are awesome. Yeah, so if I were to just tweak Alvaro's or McLean's list, I would be I want one more skeletal scrying. I don't really want to play on Mask. I don't really want to play Sickening Dreams. I don't know if I really want to play one main deck Engineered Plague, Shrug. But
The deck
regardless,
certainly needed more engineered plague action. That was one of the
well, across the
conclusions I came
75,
to.
right? Because it's just so good. Like engineered plague interacts really well. Okay, maybe you just play them
It's
all,
just
man.
so playable, I think is the word I would use, because like
No,
just
but
like,
hear me out. The synergy. Let me list the synergies between engineered plague and zombie infestation.
let
If
me
your
list the
opponent
synergies
plays,
between engineered plague and innocent blood, because if you don't have engineered plague down, your innocent blood ain't killing anything but a 1/1
so it's got even
token.
more. Okay, so engineered plague synergizes with zombie infestation because if you have nothing to plague, then you pitch the zombie infestation. But if you do have something to plague, you can make them so that they don't brawl with 2/2 zombies, and it synergizes with the innocent blood, so that if your opponent has a bunch of soldier tokens, you can innocent blood their exalted angel.
Yeah, but that's like a minimum, because if you don't like you know how I feel about people who don't have 4 engineered plagues. I feel like that they're just hubris. They're just like, oh, I'm so clever, I'm going to play infest or whatever, right? Like these people are just hubris, or they don't know how to play engineered plague. And I'm not naming any names, but we have seen Illuminati members, we've seen good players of pre-modern clearly not know how to play engineered plague, and they do it all the time on camera, right? Like they're just sitting there. Like if that had been an infest and not an engineered plague, you would have played it right. That's the thing that I'm often thinking in my head, you know. And then they're just like,
Actually,
oh man,
I think that's a very good way to put it, because people are putting infest in their deck because they want to play like infest, and like they want to, like, infest only has one mode, right? Like,
yeah. So like people are like, oh, I have spare mana, I'm going to play this engineered plague, and then they're surprised when all their engineered plagues get tranquil domain the turn before their opponent comes back. Like you can't play it that way. If this were infest, you wouldn't have done that, right? Like they're like, there's just no spare. Oh, I have spare mana, I'm just going to put this infest in my graveyard. Like that never occurs to you, you know? Like, but like there's like, oh, I have spare mana, I'm just put this engineered plague into play, and then they just get crushed for value 2 turns later, right? Like that's one thing. And so because they play their engineered plague wrong, then they come to the conclusion that infest is good. And infest might be fine, but it's fine as engineered plague 5, not engineered plague 3.
yeah,
right? Like,
I mean,
that's crazy.
I definitely like agree with that from just the perspective of like what it just like. Whatever. I mean, we'll leave it to Fran to, like, I think he gave us a paragraph about like why he wanted infest more than plague in the black-white control deck, and I understand it in just the sensibility of like against goblins specifically, which is like a tough matchup for the black-white deck, or can be a tough matchup for the black-white deck. Like infest is better for a black-white deck, because like for a deck like Grotog, which runs 12 cantrips and 4 gush, like finding 2 engineered plagues is trivial. Like,
cannot disagree more. I've shown on our Discord a bunch. Like I just played this deck in like 2005. That was the main deck I played in standard and extended. I played like a black-white cycling deck. That deck can cast Wrath of God. Like it's ridiculous to me that you would even have infest on your playables list in a deck that didn't have 4 engineered plague that can cast Wrath of God. Like if you look at it, first of all, I love the card of Chroma's Vengeance, and when I played this card both in extended and in standard, I played a Chroma's Vengeance. So I really like that card, and Chris DiBiase has the card of Chroma's Vengeance. How can you play a Chroma's Vengeance, recognize a Chroma's Vengeance is a playable card against an archetype like Elves, and also come to the conclusion that infest is a playable card? Like these are if this were a math equation, they can't both be true, right? Like they literally can't. Like infest costs 1/2 as much as a Chroma's Vengeance, right? Like if a Chroma's Vengeance is playable against Elves, then the infest's casting cost is no longer something that you're really considering, right? You should just play Wrath of God. Infest is worse than Wrath of God, and it's worse than Engineered Plague. It is not on the playables list for this archetype. If you want to put it on a playables list for another archetype, we can have a discussion about that. I don't see it in hardly any archetypes as actually being playable. I think the people who are infest advocates are just wrong. But it's straight up bad in Black.
Yeah.
You won't convince me of this.
I agree so far insofar as the black-white deck should probably run up to 4 Wrath of God before running the first copy of Infest. But
it should also run 4 Engineered Plague before running the first copy of Infest. You're getting very squeezed for where the first.
Well, no, you could just run 0. Like I think that there's an argument to be made that like your deck benefits from playing Wrath of God style effects rather than. I'll break it down like this. Like first you need to live in a world where like playing Wraths makes more sense than playing Engineered Plagues. So one of the big reasons why you want to play Engineered Plagues instead of Wraths is that you have creatures of your own. So the black-white deck doesn't really hang with this concept because the only creatures it plays are soldier tokens, Exalted Angel, and Eternal Dragon, which all happen after the Wrath of God spot.
By the way, I think so. While I recognize that Exalted Angel is a playable card in the pre-modern version of black-white, I think it's quite poor. I think like you get some life gain from Gerard's Verdict, and then you get your end game from Eternal Dragon. Like Exalted Angel is a very bad oddball in this strategy, in particular because of, especially if you're going to play Infest, right? It catches your own Exalted Angel sometimes.
Well, no, but my point is like you wouldn't cast Exalted Angel and follow Infest. You would cast.
A player with Infest in their deck does not always get to pick. Let's be clear about this.
Yeah, I'm just saying that in any world in which you have a face down Exalted Angel on the table and like mana to flip it, like you're literally like in the world where your mana is like BW1 face down Exalted Angel, top deck Infest, or am holding Infest and like didn't cast Vindicate or something because you had BW1 draw B source.
This
forced
Lanny,
to cast Infest. Like Mike,
Lanny, this is all I'm saying. The Rock. You don't get to pick what cards you draw.
Mike, I'm just telling you that the world that you're describing in which you would get this was the world in which you're describing in which you would infest your own face down angel is like very, very unlikely. Like just from a mathematical perspective, like you literally would need to be like BB1, not have the infest, face down the angel, not have WW to flip the angel, and be forced to cast the infest before waiting for your second white source. Waiting for your white source at all.
How about, can I give you an alternate scenario? The best play you have at hand, because you need to play defense, is to play the Exalted Angel face down on a turn, and then your opponent makes a high leverage play. For example, they put a Siege Gang Commander into play, and now you're forced to cast the Infest that you weren't forced to the previous turn. That is super plausible. It has nothing to do with whether or not you can flip the Exalted Angel.
I mean, like I said,
that's just seriously I can imagine that coming up.
I know you can imagine it. I know you can imagine it. The same way you can imagine like triple swamp, like no second white source or whatever. But like even in that world, like flipping the angel, getting in, like it's like what else do you not have Vindicate? Like your opponent's on 5 mana and you're on 3. Like what turn is it? Like. Again, I
don't know. Like, what if they had? There's just a lot of ways that this could happen.
No, there's not a lot of ways. It's one way. Like you're describing one bust.
Okay, my opponent has 2 lackeys and attacks with both of them.
You're literally just asking, what if your opponent hits a step back 3? It's just like, well, I don't have a fucking answer for that. But the rest of the time, I've got my hands in the air. Okay.
No one has an answer to that. The step back 3 is unguardable. That's the reason.
I know. But I'm telling you that it's okay. Like this
I love that that's the analogy you use, by the way.
Yeah, because it's correct. Because you
what
know
if my opponent hits a step back 3? Yes, every team has to deal with that.
Sometimes, yeah. My point is like pretty simple. Like I'm just trying to build a case, which is just that one, there are decks that like effects like infests. This deck. It's just a question of of whether or not it's one of them. So like, I'll put it quite plainly. Like I played, like the last time I played Goblins, I have this on video. My opponent triumphantly cast Engineered Plague. It was the single sideboard card that they drew for that game, and they promptly lost because some Goblins have 2 toughness. In fact, all of the important Goblins have 2 toughness. Or cost 1 mana, right?
I can think of 2 goblins that don't have 2 toughness that are pretty important
to get under Engineered Plague. So in this world in which you're going to just draw a bunch of cards that are normally in your main deck, and you're going to draw precisely one sideboard card. If that precisely one sideboard card is Infest, it's going to be better for you against goblins in a style deck like this than precisely one Engineered Plague. Now, what happens if you draw two sideboard cards and they happen to be Engineered Plagues? Then you're like super like can't lose the game, hysterical. And like I've been in that spot a lot of times because I put 4 Engineered Plague in all my decks that can produce black mana.
Yes, because you recognize the hubris of playing fewer than 4.
But
you're tempting the dealer. That's actually all you're doing. You're saying, okay, I'm going to play 2 Engineered Plagues. Dealer, if you've got me, I'll draw them both. Otherwise, you'd be like, dealer, I'm making your life easier.
Yeah. So anyways, my argument would be like, if you live in this world, then your sideboard should contain 4 Infest, right? If you're like, my deck doesn't draw a lot of cards, it's not going to see its sideboard cards within the, like, this is like a really important concept that I talk about all the time in sideboarding, which is just like, people are just like, oh, Lanny, why don't you play 3 chill or 2 chill and 2 Call the Herd in your sideboard of Grotog? And I'm just like, I have to draw the chill. Like,
no,
I can't.
Well, it's not that you have to draw the chill. You need to draw the chill. Like, so, like, if you're going to use all these cantrips, like, cantrips, even 1 mana cantrips imply a turn cycle, right? Like, a Portent is a turn cycle, and Opt is a turn cycle in the early part of the game. You might have already de facto lost.
Yeah, you get the exactly, and that's exactly right? My point. Like, I board out Sleight of Hand and Opt, and like I'm not keeping a 7 with Portent, hoping that chill is in the top 3.
Hoping that chill is in the top 3.
Especially if I only have 3 or 2 chill in my sideboard. Like, and like this is the same concept.
This is really good stuff. I think that this needs to be systematized because this is like evergreen Magic content.
Yeah. I'm
that people could understand things better. Like versus like, yeah, I so agree with you. But the same thing with Engineered Plague. You really want to draw the second one, right? But you can't draw the second one until you've drawn the first.
Right. But so let's take this back. So it's very unlikely for you to draw 2 Engineered Plague. It's very unlikely for you to draw 2 sideboard cards. If you're boarding in like 6 sideboard cards, you're not very likely to draw 2 inside of the first 4 turns. And against matchups like goblins or elves, the first 4 turns are going to matter because you're like a turn, you're a mid-game, late game deck, right? So the first few turns are all about surviving, and you're using the best tools that you have to your ability. So in this world in which I'm going to draw and I have this concept. I have a falling concept. So in this world, like if you're going to sideboard for fast decks, you're going to want to board in 1, a lot of sideboard cards. 2, the sideboard cards have to be extremely effective, right? They have you can't just mulligan into have 1 Hydroblast and then expect that to get you there, right? It needs to be super high leverage cards. And then the final thing is like if it's turn 3 and you're facing down. Maybe you're on the draw, whatever, you're facing down like War Chief and Pile Driver, you don't want your 1 sideboard card that you drew to be Engineered Plague. Now, if that's your strategy, then you should play 4 Infest, right?
Wait, so slow down for a second, because I think that there's some stuff that you've gone very fast on. So if it's turn 1, a single Hydroblast that let's say that you were wise enough to just not mulligan into a single Hydroblast, right, on turn 1, is basically the same as a Force Spike. A Hydroblast starts getting exciting on turn 7.
Yeah.
When, okay, I have 1 mana answer to anything, and I can, cast my Factor Fictions, or I can Gush with Impunity, or whatever the thing you want to do with the rest of your mana is, you have the equivalent of a counterspell that's 1 mana.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, some decks are decks that contain 4 Swords of Plowshares, and they just need 6 Swords of Plowshares. So they bring in Hydroblast.
That's
right?
a great So the way that Land still uses Hydroblast against goblins, that's a great example, right? You just, as long as you don't get pinned under the first lackey, you're probably gonna, you like turns 2 and 3 a lot more than goblins likes turn 2 and 3. Then when they get to turns 4 and 5, it's an interesting game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, if you've identified that you have a matchup that you struggle with, and you've identified that the way that you struggle with it, like against goblins, is just like super simple. Like a lot of people are just like, there's a few ways to lose to goblins. One of them is to just like lose to beatdown.
And there are a lot of ways you can lose to goblins.
And the other one is to lose to value. And
how many times did Landy Ho kill somebody with a lightning bolt in his goblins deck?
I mean, I don't test against Landy Ho's sacrilegious lightning bolt goblins. But
I'm just saying there's a lot of ways to lose goblins.
regardless, you look at the black-white deck and you're just like, okay, like I'm good. I can defeat Ringleader, right? Because my top end is Exalted Angel, Wrath of Gods, Cycling Decree of Justice. I can handle Ringleader, but I can't handle like Lackey Piledriver, right? Like Lackey Piledriver is going to be too much. Like I'm only drawing to 4 stars Posh. So if you identified this problem, what's the solution to the problem? It's like, if I can, on turn 3, if I can clear the board and I have like 12 life, then I can probably turn that into a win. Then you need to play a lot of copies of Infest, or you can just go create like the current black-white really does mostly just run Swords of Plowshares, and then maybe like a copy of Smother or a copy of I mean, there's a Chainer's Edict in Chris's sideboard, so like
I like Smother a lot in black-white. It's just like kind of extra Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, but Vindicate here is not a great plan, because there's really nothing you can Vindicate.
Vindicate. I mean, I like how you put it. It almost makes me think Vindicate's a playable card, which is that like it's not a disenchant and it's not a Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's either one,
it's super not like it's a Swords of, like it's an extra Swords of Plowshares against Dreadnought, right? Which only has 1 to 2 Swords of Plowshares targets. It's not a Swords of Plowshares against Goblins when 3 mana is going to matter.
Lan has Vindicate in a deck that's like a Terra Oath deck, but he has Vindicate in the Winter's Grasp slot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
He's just like, that's awesome,
yeah.
Right? He's just like, I have Winter's Grasp also, but it's just Vindicate. And then now you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I was already in for Winter's Grasp.
It's a disenchant.
Now it's anything.
Yeah.
This is really good. That's so different from like people are like, oh, well, I have kind of 8 Swords to Plowshares and 5 disenchants, but my Swords to Plowshares disenchants are very slow and bad.
Yeah.
Like that the opposite is like, well, I'm pinning you under Sphere of Resistance, but if you get a Cerebor, I'm going to kill it instead of killing your stupid forest.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. You know?
And you don't have to sideboard
and they don't
out.
gain life.
Yeah.
The MFers don't gain 20 life when you cast it. They just lose their guy.
I'm in besides trying to figure out how BWG is being made in my Port Wasteland.
Yeah, it's a reimagining.
It's just a different deck.
I was supposed to play it in the last meetup, but I didn't get to Manhattan in time, so I had to play my own.
No, fair enough.
Just regular Fran 1, and I went 3-1. I probably would have done worse if I had Landsec, because I played against the red deck. So
right. Oh yeah. Well, so regardless, if you live in this world, then like you want Infest, and if you want Infest in this world, then you want 4 Infest. Now, one other thing that I think advocates for splitting cards, we talk about this a lot with like stuff like Shock and Seal of Fire. You can look at Infest Engineered Plague the same way. You can look at Counterspell Mana Leak the same way. If you look at my Storm sideboard, I have 15 cards, like, and they're all in sections of like 6 or 7 where they all do close to the same thing, but just in different ways. And so one of the arguments you could make against what I'm saying, which is just like, okay, maybe Engineered Plague is close enough to Infest that if you draw either Engineered Plague or Infest, you feel like you're going to stabilize. And you just need to have some Infest, because if you're all Plagues, then you'll never have a chance of drawing Infest when you need to. And if you're all Infest, you're never going to have Plague when you need to. And so you're just going to split, because sometimes, like, Engineered Plague's a better card against Elves, where they all have 1 toughness. Infest is a better card against Goblins, where they all have 2 toughness. And then a bunch of corner cases that are covered by other decks, like Infest, is good, sometimes better against blue-white Flippy or blue-white white weenie decks. If they have fewer humans, but some blue-white weenie decks have like mostly humans, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's okay to do a split, but I also think that like you have Engineered Plague, it makes all your Decree of Justice like super potent later on. It definitely feels like this is a deck that benefits from 4 Engineered Plague. In the world where somehow you have a face down Exalted Angel, it is still like, one thing I will say about that scenario is that you won't be compelled to flip the Exalted Angel on turn 4 if your turn your sequence can be turn 3 Engineered Plague into turn 4 Face Down Angel, and then the Angel will dominate the battlefield, and then you'll flip it, and then it'll continue to dominate the battlefield.
That's a great scenario where Angel plus Engineered Plague is much better than Angel plus Infest, where the Infest would just kill the Exalted Angel.
Well, conceivable. Like, I'm saying that if you cast your sideboard,
you do it in a different order.
Well, no, if you cast your sideboard card in front, but like against goblins, like assuming that you're able to put creatures and continue to put creatures in play, like Engineered Plague's going to be good, right? But like. And it's also just timing, right? So it's like you could infest. Like, one of the super awkward things about infest is just that, like, you might be forced to 2-for-1 with an infest, which like won't be that exciting, right? Because if they just go like turn 1 Mog Fanatic, like if you're on the play, they go turn 1 Mog Fanatic, turn 2 Pile Driver, and like you unfortunately didn't draw any early game interaction, but you're on the play, like you kind of are not hyped to infest for just a Pile Driver, but you're also really not hyped to pass the turn. Like, you'll pass the turn, they'll War Chief, you'll take 7, 8.
Now are you hyped? I mean,
you'll take 8, and then you're gonna be like, now I'll infest.
Yeah,
and then
you shut the barn door after the stampede has already happened.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, guys. Hold on, I'm shutting the barn door.
So now you infest. You have 1 mana, which you don't use.
You have no remainder. They play.
And then they play Ringleader.
They play a Ringleader.
And then you're like, you take another 2. So you've taken 10, 11 Mog Fanatic activation. So now you're
if
at
you had played the Engineered Plague,
7.
you would have taken 3, right? Then you'd be, and then even if they play the Ringleader, you will have taken less damage than you had taken the 2 turns earlier. In the infest scenario, you've actually taken less damage at this point still.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And then if you, God forbid, you draw a second.
I'm on the side of 4 Engineered Plague. I'm just saying
you're on the side of right.
I'm just saying conceivably you can run 4 infest, and we're already in a you didn't Swords of Plowshares universe, right? So it's like if you did have Swords of Plowshares, then you can sandbag your infest, you can go Vindicate.
This episode is making me sad because this episode has like at least 3 or 4 points at this point of my favorite theoretical things that maybe have never even been written down in any article or anything. But we spent the first hour talking about a stupid contamination deck that neither of us likes, so people might not get to the good theoretical.
No, they'll get. We have incredible listen through percentage.
Yeah.
Shout out to the fans, and there's nothing that's going to stop us from putting this down on pen and paper. I want to write an article about second order sideboard cards too. I feel like nobody's really. Because we had a conversation. That's a really interesting topic, right? Like for example, a Goblin deck siding in Naturalize against a deck where they know that they're going to be playing against Engineered. Right, exactly. Right? And that's sort of like, especially, this is relevant in the Black-White case where Black-White, the only artifact or enchantment that they're going to sideboard in is Engineered Plague, and like sometimes Circle of Protection Red, but like I kind of don't care. Like it's not
dumb. Great, but it has text.
Yeah. It's better than. Is it better than Vindicate?
I mean, Vindicate is pretty bad.
Vindicate is really bad.
So when I used to play that deck, Goblins was at its height. Actually, when I used to play that deck in Standard and in Extended, I used to play Sphere of Law. I thought Sphere of Law was really good.
Yeah.
Like if you have a Sphere of Law and a Cranial Extraction, your Goblin's opponent can't win.
Yeah.
So like that's all you need. And like it's a 2-card combo to win the game. 8
mana, but yeah.
What?
8 mana, but yeah.
Yeah, but
the first one puts up the wall, and then the second one.
Yeah, but like if they don't have the second thing, they're not getting through anyway. Right?
No, I'm with it. I mean, I think second order sideboard is just like a huge topic. I think the simplest one is just that, like, I think a lot of people when they talk about matchups, like. This has actually gotten to the point where it's a little bit annoying to me. Like I try not to complain. I really appreciate all the engagement. I love the open conversation. But one of the things I hate is when I am out there and I'm just like, listen.
What forum are you talking about?
All of them. Just doesn't matter. It shouldn't
be all of them.
No, it's all of them. It's even the one that you're thinking of, especially the one that you're thinking of.
Because it shouldn't be in the one that I'm thinking.
No, it is in the one.
I know it is, and it shouldn't be there.
Okay, so you'll go out.
I'm like, what is going on here?
So you'll go out there, and I'll just be like, this is a good matchup for this deck, and it'll just be like, what are you talking about? We have this card, like. what are they like? They can't beat this card. It's like it just doesn't work. Like I have this card, right? Like sometimes it does. Like sometimes cards are like Sabo's Web against Fluctuator. It's just like if you have Sabo's Web against Fluctuator and you have if you have a preponderance of it. But even in that example, the Fluctuator player can just you can just not draw it, right? They just need to untap one single land, and then they have another land in their deck.
It's like have two blasted landscapes.
Yeah,
that's fine,
yeah, and they can have blasted landscapes. So it doesn't even like it's hilarious against Fluctuator. It probably gets, but anyways,
gets them.
One of the examples, like people kind of, and don't get me wrong, this wasn't a stupid question. It's been a stupid question before. It's a question that is asked in good faith. So again, there's no stupid questions. I don't want to scare people away from like engaging in the discourse, but I do think that it's important to like introduce like a little bit more nuance than just like, oh, I have this card and this card, right? Because like one of the things that this black-white control deck does, which is debatable how good it is, which is just kind of like, okay, we have this black-white control deck and we're like, we lose to Armageddon. It's like, okay, we're going to sideboard Sacred Ground. It's like, okay, what if
so bad?
What if they what if they destroy your Sacred Ground? What if you don't draw your two Sacred Grounds?
Exactly the same as when people are like, why don't you play Defense Grid and Replenish? I'm like, well, any deck that Defense Grid is good against is going to have all of their disenchants in against me because I'm an enchantment-based deck. So I should choose a different strategy.
So it's not exactly the same because Defense Grid is... It's important. Defense Grid is obviously... struggles for that reason. You could at least make the argument that if the only way that your opponent, like if your opponent's only plan is counterspells and disenchants, then you can overload the disenchants with like trading your Defense Grid for either a counterspell or a disenchant is still good. But
what is the interaction between my Defense Grid and my, I don't know, Frantic Search?
Well, it's fine. You would never Frantic Search on your opponent's turn.
Never?
You would practically never. It's like gushing on your opponent's turn.
Okay, what about
just
my
intuition? Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad with your intuition.
Okay.
But
I was just checking.
But the point is, so Defense Grid is kind of an interesting one because, in a sense, it's a second order sideboard card. But second order sideboard cards are very common in combo decks, right? A Fluctuator sideboard is a second order strategy in many cases, but you've got the like Devourer sideboard, which has to run second order sideboard cards because you cannot win the game if your opponent has Curse Totem, Engineered Plague, sometimes Meddling Mage on Tinker. Obviously, you can get around that by hard casting Devourer. But so a lot of combo decks like to run second order sideboard cards, but like a second order sideboard card like Sacred Ground or Planar Rebirth or Planar Birth definitely kind of makes me want to vomit. The best thing that you can do is a viable strategy, and sometimes you can build strategies around sideboard cards. So for instance, the Dreadnought deck has the Armageddon thing, which is like a strategy pivot, or the Brain Freeze thing, which is like a complete strategic pivot, right? It's not a second order sideboard card. It's similar to the way I like to play Blue-Eye Replenish to support an Exalted Angel, which again is like, it's like a full pivot. It's like if you only have Disenchants and Graveyard Hate, then Exalted Angel is going to get there. So if we look at the case of Black-White against Armageddon, well, sometimes like, and this is where Planar Birth looks a lot better because Planar Birth looks a lot better than Sacred Ground. It's like sometimes if your opponent just doesn't kill you the turn right after they cast Armageddon, then either sandbagging lands and eventually Planar Birthing, or just sandbagging lands period, can get you where you need to be. One hilarious thing that happened to me in one of my videos was just like I literally played Meddling Mage naming Planar Birth because that was like the only way my opponent could like unlock their hand or whatever. But we don't have enough time to go over second order sideboard cards, but I do think that like the numbers and the questions that you ask yourself about sideboarding should be one of those things. And then also like you need to like ask yourself in certain matchups, like just because you have cards that are good against an opposing deck, like it's not going to make the make your matchup great. Like I think a lot of people see this with like the Silver Knight decks where they're just like, oh, I have Silver Knight, I'm never going to lose to goblins or burn. And it's just like, you need Silver Knight and this and that.
Silver Knight
and other
creates
things.
your baseline. It's not like the lock, right? But I think those decks often that are like Silver Knight and Galena's Knight, Mother of Runes Worship, and Sultari Priest, they tend to do pretty good.
Yeah, those three good, right? But
like,
you've like literally named like stuff comprising about like 20 slots in a deck.
Yeah, but there's decks that have all that.
No, that's true. And don't get me wrong, those decks aren't going to lose to red, but at an extreme detriment to the win rate outside.
To their rock matchup.
Yeah. Or to their just like call the herd matchup.
Yet another matchup where the rock excels. Oh, Lan solved it though. Lan took out all like the stuff that's just like pinpoint stuff against Burn and Landstill or whatever. And he's just like, what if we just played Glorious Anthems? And I was just like, what if we just played Crusade? And he's just like, I can't find any on any site there.
Yeah, I can't buy those cards.
It's like theoretically.
No. Land's actual reason was that Glorious Anthem pumps. Yeah, it pumps Mishra's Factory, which actually is super relevant, he says. And then also, like, it's better against the mirror, right?
Yeah, but it's actually a really novel way to go about it that other people hadn't done, and it makes a shit ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super solid. There's other issues, like that does not solve the Pernicious Deed problem, but it's certainly a sweet way to beat Infest.
The Call of the Herd problem.
It is not really good against Call of the Herd. Yeah.
Different problems.
Wait. It doesn't solve the Call of the Herd problem, Mike.
Why?
Spider Silk Armor.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Spider Silk Armor.
We always have Spider Silk Armor
every time. I think like Spider Silk Armor has Flash and costs 0 mana too, right?
No. But
and it doesn't cost slots in your deck.
Yeah.
You just have Spider Silk Armor.
No, you have it. It's a companion.
Oh. What if you could companion Spider Silk Armor? I would companion.
If you could companion Infest, you would, right? And so you would need to play for.
If it didn't have any deck building costs.
I think. Anyways, I kind of wanted to bring that back. It's like one of the things is like I think a lot of people have been like talking about Replenish recently. They're like, oh, Replenish is super powerful. It's got it does this and that or whatever. And I was like, fundamentally, Replenish has like this huge problem, which it plays 20 cards. 16 cards that cost 4 mana. And it's just like no other deck does this, and like the entire Replenish experience revolves around how like hard it is to cast 2 spells in one turn if all your spells cost 4 mana.
I think when Replenish was super good, aka LobsterCon 2022, the format was so much slower and more naive, and there was more rock.
Yeah. Well, I guess there really wasn't a premier like land destruction deck either. Not to say that Red Green Oath has a great Replenish matchup, but its Replenish matchup is compromised because Replenish is aware of. Well, I guess Terrageddon was kind of a deck, but Replenish has always been pretty okay against Terrageddon. It's like I guess I don't know. Like okay, I'll put it this way. I'm actually not even good at explaining my own point because I'm just like the problem is you have all these 4 mana spells, and it's just like, but Replenish is kind of generally good against decks that attack the mana base. Now, if they attack the mana base and they have Meddling Mage
if
and
you're like
Counterspell,
Lanny Replenish, you're like 27 lands, 4 mocks, and hunt cards, then like you might just
but I'm just talking about like I play my deck like I built my deck like because of that problem, right? And like some people build Replenish in spite of that problem, right? Some people have 22 or 23 land Replenish and they just like are like, fuck it, we ball. So
yeah, but you don't play Careful Study, right? Like I played Careful Study.
Yeah. I mean, that obviously helped you hit your land drops, and there was plenty of reason to.
I was like dumping Squee to draw land. Like
that was. But one of the things is just kind of like, okay, like, I made a pretty simple statement. I was just like, Meddling Mage is really good against Replenish. And like, Matt P had something to say about it. Sam Black had something to say. Matt P was just like, why is Meddling Mage good against Replenish? You have Replenish, you have Parallax Wave, and you have Swords of Plowshares. And it's just like, okay, well, if I Meddling Mage, like one, like, you don't have all 3 of those cards in your hand at a given point in time. Your opponent gets to choose like which one is bad news for them. And then 2, like if your opponent just has counter spells behind Meddling Mage, then Meddling Mage doing Swords of Plowshares means that like you cast one card per turn, which is going to be Replenish or Parallax Wave, and they cast Counterspell, and then you're super behind. Like Swords of Plowshare is gluing the entire deck together, giving you the chance to like actually double spell or actually spend your mana efficiently in their early turns. And then Sam Black was just like, oh well, you can just like play Seal Cleansing. It's just kind of like, yes, you can play Seal Cleansing, and you can kind of like set up this like turn or whatever, but like you're still like just playing differently named removal, like helps in one hand, but like doesn't help like the other thing, which is it doesn't help make your
Lanny, to me, none of this
smart.
changes the fact that it is a card that has text.
What, the seal removal
Meddling Mage
or Meddling Mage? Yeah, exactly. Like Meddling Mage just gets in on Replenish, and like like just because Replenish can do something about Meddling Mage, and this kind of goes back to second order stuff, which is just that like it's almost always like a weird second order thing, like Last Breath or Seal Cleansing. And don't get me wrong, those are flexible cards, you can bring them in other matchups or like whatever, but just because you boarded in Chain of Vapor, right, doesn't mean that you solve the Meddling Mage problem. And one of the other simple things is that like the sequence that, in order to beat Meddling Mage Counterspell, the sequence that you're thinking of is just like Chain of Vapor, like I guess like this is the best way to do it. End step, Last Breath, your Meddling Mage. That gets countered. Untap, Orange Chant, Replenish. Just like, and hope you're alive long enough to like make this thing happen. Like,
it depends on the matchup.
Yeah, it depends on the matchup. Okay, let me talk about another thing, which is just that like the combo decks in pre-modern. The reason why the best combo deck in pre-modern is Dreadnought is that the Dreadnought combo takes 2 mana up front, and then you put all the other combo pieces behind. Decks like Hermit Feb and Replenish have to spend like a trillion mana to like make their thing happen. Like Replenish, you need to like have Intuition Replenish. Ideally, a Frantic Search in the mix, but like Intuition Replenish. Hopefully, that locks you into then casting the 3rd enchantment that you need. Sometimes you're spinning Attunement multiple times. Like these combo decks, like spend a lot of their mana to do nothing to assemble a combo, whereas like if your opponent is playing just like their average aggro mid-range control deck, like they're spending their mana to interact with you or kill you. So you can't always afford that. Now Replenish obviously has upside, which is just that like sometimes your mana into Parallax Wave means that you can stop your opponent while assembling the combo.
Is the best deck the one that can deal 20 to 24 damage inside of the fastest window? Because I think like if that's your condition, then I buy it on Dreadnought. But like other decks can do much more damage or can like kill somebody unconditionally. Like Devourer, Hermit Feb.
Yeah, but Devourer
are like nearly as fast and have higher ceilings.
Devourer is 5 mana to execute the combo plus whatever mana you put on in the artifact that you're sacrificing. Angry Hermit is obviously super good, but
it's like 3 mana.
It is 2 mana for the Hermit Druid, and then another 2 mana for the activation plus the reanimate, if everything goes well. I mean, like, the problem with that deck, right, is that the 1/1 is a lot colder than the 12/12. But that deck also has the 12/12, so it's kind of like, that's kind of sweet.
Yeah, if you know you're up against elves or something, and you have like an...
Yeah, you just
like
jam.
A Elvish Spirit Guide in your opening hand, you're like, YOLO!
Yeah. But, like, Dreadnought's, like, the best... Dreadnought's, like, the only combo deck that's in the discussion for best deck of the format. That's the thing.
Well, that is true.
So,
I mean, so what's the best control deck in the format? Isn't one?
None of the above, yeah.
Oath is the best, and it's
you would.
It's more of a prison deck.
Yeah, I mean, is like Oath the best deck at controlling? It's just like maybe not. Like it doesn't have the best
deck at controlling is like Flippy, maybe the Rock.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, because like one of the issues is just that like in pre-modern, your opponent's battlefield, their hand, their artifacts, enchantments, their lands, and their graveyard all need to be controlled. And like most decks like use 3 of those things. So like black-white control is like really good against decks that are like battlefield, right? But it's just like I lost your audio for a sec. Your audio is down, Mike. But yeah, I'm saying.
How about now?
Yeah, it's here.
So I was gonna say, like, red deck is a really powerful graveyard deck, right? It's a threshold deck, and it also
don't I know it?
Fuel directly for Grim Lava Man, and it also flashes back Lava Dart against combo decks.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if I were to like list, I would still say red deck is like battlefield, then stack,
No,
then
it's
graveyard.
hand. It's
Yeah, sure,
hand.
sure. Hand and stack. I mean the same thing. I'm okay with hand or battlefield. Like I'm kind of into permanence. You know, I'm kind of into playing like the best card or the highest ceiling card is like Jackal Pup, and then like my favorite card is like. So the best cards are Bolt and Fire Blast, so I guess that's why hand is the best. But then you have like Jackal Pup and Sulfuric Vortex, and those are insane. So
those are super, but those are mana efficient cards.
yeah. So tied for hand and battlefield with like some graveyard upside. Like their graveyard can beat you, but then their lands can beat you too. Like Barbarian Ring is like a land card and a graveyard
Adrian
card.
Sullivan taught me this in 1998. He said that there are some people. He said like the Invoke thing is for battlefield not to be important, right? At the time, that was the Invoke thing.
Yeah.
He says, but then there are other people like me. He was referring to himself, right? Who think that there are some permanents worth investing in, and that like that's
Elephant
kind of
Token.
Those are like that's the divide between players, is people who think that it's important to invest in battlefield or not. Today in contemporary Magic, that's not even a question.
Right. It's all about. But this is kind of like the sweet thing about pre-modern, which is just that like one of the best value engines in pre-modern is just a creature and attacking, right? Like, you know, Jackal Pup, Elephant Token, like Meddling Mage.
Your opponent for later tonight, Iron Lungs, believes Mountain Jackal Pup is the most powerful engine in pre-modern.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, modern Mog Fanatic. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't agree with him. I believe that it's Mountain Mog Fanatic.
You believe that it's Mountain Jackal Pup. He thinks Mog Fanatic, you think it's Jackal Pup.
No, I actually think it's Grim Lavamancer.
Oh yeah, Grim Lavamancer. I'm inclined to agree. I certainly would make an argument for Elephant Token.
Grim Lavamancer, that guy. Nobody generates fear. Like you could see the spinal fluid running through your opponent's ears.
Lavamancer.
The second Lava Man hits the
Lavamancer did a number on me in week 1 of the PSS.
Imagine you were I don't know, an Elves deck, and your opponent played a first turn Grim Lavamancer.
Yeah,
like
life would not be easy. But But yeah, so regardless, it's just like you're looking like, you know, it's just like how we were talking about. It's just like you've got this Goblins deck, which is like crazy, and then you've got this Burn deck, which is like crazy. If you're a control deck, like how are you going to beat this? You know, you really have to be doing your own thing that's proactive. And
you have to turn the corner real quick. That's the thing. And then you actually have to actively control multiple zones. That's very different from contemporary Magic, which is like you turn the corner and then you kill them. Yeah. Which is versus in pre-modern.
But it's still in a proactive fashion, right? Like the contemporary control decks just have like planeswalkers, which like, you know, make it so that once you're ahead, you stay ahead.
That was one of Roman's innovations, and he says like people get this wrong a lot, where people are like, oh, I want to play 1 Jace, right? And I'm like, why don't you play 4 Jaces? And they're like, I want to cut Jaces. And Roman's like, the first Jace is irrelevant. The combo is 2 Jaces. If you only have 1 Jace, like your opponent was milled for 15 and then beats you with 15 cards in their deck. Right, you actually need 2 Jaces. Like you can't go to 1 Jace. That's not on the table, and that's the thing that a lot of people are thinking about. They just don't get it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like but that's exactly my point. But Black White Control actually has a little bit of that structure where like Eternal Dragon, Exalted Angel, and Decree of Justice, they are kind of bad defensive cards, but sometimes they can like do a good defensive impression, like just enough defense, but they're really, really sweet at closing the game. Like against, like I've had games against Black White Control, like with my Storm deck, and like Storm is like generally good against Black White Control, but like if they can get that Decree of Justice in, and like still put me in the spot through their hand disruption, where they can clock you. Like
I know this is like a 90-degree turn, but I wanted to get this in because I haven't done any yet. Have you done any testing for pre-modern and chill yet? Have you even thought about it?
No. I mean, I'll probably just play Grotog and then.
So am I just supposed to play Burn? Is that like, I was gonna play my Thursday deck again, except for with red permanents instead of white permanents, so that I could. I'm just gonna treat it like a tournament and like play a deck that I think is good. Like maybe I'll play something different, but like I'll probably just play Grotog and then, you know, have 4 chill in the sideboard and be like the fun killer if I play against only red or like whatever. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel. I wouldn't play Black White Control in this room.
I wouldn't play Black White Control really in any room. Like I have a lot of respect for the deck. I think that it's one of the best. It's probably the best deck at what it does. Like, it's really
What are
good.
the decks that what is us? Thursday is like the number 2 deck at what that does.
I mean, I don't know. The thing is, what Thursday? Yeah. Oh, you mean like the best? Thursday's the second best Eternal Dragon deck.
Eternal Dragon, Exalted Angel, Wrath of God, Decree of Justice deck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Thursday deck is just a little out of tune. Like, it just needs.
So where does
a little
Slide
love.
come in? Because I think Slide is pretty competitive with Black-White Control.
I mean, I don't know. Like, again, if you have any notion that Slide is a playable deck, you're gonna have to prove it, because pretty much everybody who plays it has completely given up on it. But
it just needs a space. It's not like an open world deck. It's like it's a really good PSS deck.
maybe it's a really good pre-modern and chill deck.
It's actually probably a great pre-modern
Yeah.
chill deck.
It's one of the few decks that beats goblins and burn, which we were just talking about, because it's so good at defending its life total. It's so good against defending the battlefield, and those are the two sort of things that beat burn and goblins together. And like typically the way that one deck beats burn by protecting its life total can't deal with the scaling of goblins, and the way that decks deal with the goblin scaling can't deal with like the small ball, like 3 damage at a time.
Are you trying to trick me into playing it because you're going to play a Winter Orb Armageddon deck against a deck that has no defense against Winter Orb Armageddon?
Maybe you figure out a solution to that problem. Maybe you hold back your lands, or you play Planar Birth. Who knows? Like,
there's no holding back your lands in a deck that needs 7 lands in play to function.
We'll see. But the Black-White Control deck, I think, like, does a good, like, use all of the Buffalo kind of like situation. Like, again, it's kind of pinned together with Vindicate. Gerard's Verdict is like pretty sweet. Again, like, it's one of the few discard spells that's like good against like goblins and burn. Like, it's not great. Like, don't get me wrong, it's probably sideboarded out like against goblins, but
It's okay, but you side it out.
Yeah, it's okay, but in game 1, it's better than drawing a disenchant, right? It's better than drawing a complete blank. It's better than drawing an impulse. Like, if we're being super serious, like,
everything is better than impulse. That's why we cut impulse. You have your match against Iron Lungs.
No, I don't have it for. We're scheduled at 8:30. It's 6.
Oh, I thought you said 7.
No, it's 8:30. But I am gonna run to the grocery store at some point and cook dinner for my wife. So there's that. But yeah. So the Black-White deck, like, is it the best control deck in the format? Probably. Is it like? Does that mean control is good?
No,
not really.
If it is the best control deck, which I do not know that it is, then that is not a great vote for.
Yeah, I mean,
control in general.
If you look at the decks that are good in the format,
so
like,
what's the best beatdown deck? Goblins, right?
Like, yeah, goblins or burn.
And what's the best combo deck? Elves?
No, it's Dreadnought.
Elves.
Elves is not good, as we've discussed. We discussed last week. Nick Mayo himself said that, like, no, like, Elves is super beatable. We're just like not in a world where Elves is
beatable.
Like,
Dreadnought's not winning anything.
No, it's like Elves.
I listened to that podcast. First of all, I was quietly on that podcast, and you guys were making fun of me. I had not been eliminated from the RC yet at that point that I signed in. There was just 20 minutes between each round. But Dreadnought is eminently beatable right now. Also,
I'm not saying
it in my lineup.
I'm not saying Elves is bad because it's beatable. It's just like Elves is way more beatable than Dreadnought is. Like, and like, you know, we're talking to somebody who like just plays Elves, or like plays Elves like, you know, 95% of the time. It's like he's out there, he's got a feel for the metagame, and he's feels like he's struggling against the currents, right? Like, you know, I don't know. I think Roadhog is the best control deck in the format, maybe. Like,
so here's a question. This is actually a legit question that's inspired by Landy Ho, but I think that he will have gotten to a different place despite inspiring this question. Everybody has red deck sideboard cards. Like, and most people have a lot of red deck sideboard cards, right? Like, you're a 4-chill man. Everyone's got Hydroblasts, you know, all this stuff. Why is red deck and goblins still able to do so well consistently despite the constant pressure from opposing sideboards?
The answer is what we just discussed, right? Was that, like, one, you always lose game 1. Like, every time. So then, if you're boarding in 4 chills, or you're boarding in 4 chills and like two, I don't know, if you're boarding in 3 circle protection red, 3 warmth, you still might miss them in the next 2 games. Like, you're going to be on the draw, and then you're right. Like, the best thing about Sulfuric Vortex is that it's a second order sideboard card and a main strategy card, right? Vortex deals damage to your opponent, stops your opponent's life gain.
It stops Phantom Nishoba.
Yeah, it stops Phantom Nishoba. So then you're talking about a third order sideboard card. It's like, okay, well, I've got my Warmth, but then I also need to bring in Naturalize to deal with Sulfuric Vortex, which deals with the Warmth, right? Which is not to say that Naturalize doesn't have other targets, but once again, it's like reacting to a reaction, which is very, very thin.
I love this topic.
Yeah, you're asking
interesting topic.
Yeah, it'll be. We'll have to expand upon. I do want to structure it out into an article, but like. Yeah, why is red so good in the face of incredible sideboarding? Is because the incredible sideboarding is the only way that you can beat the deck. Like, if you flip it, like that's what we talked about in weeks. Just like if you flip it on its head, it's just kind of like, okay, well, what's the other option, right?
Lose.
Like, people are gonna play burn, and you're just gonna like, are you just gonna, like you just lose?
It's the most popular deck at LC every year.
Yeah, it's the most popular deck at practically any large scale paper tournament across the entire globe, and.
I'm a flat earther, so I'm offended at your use of the word globe.
But yeah, we played against that Landstill player who brought in 11 sideboard cards, and he needed every single one. Like, he needed to draw, like, it wasn't enough for him to just draw Warmth. It wasn't enough to draw Circle of Protection. And that's kind of uniquely different than certain sideboard cards. Like, if you draw your Cursed Totem against Elves or your Engineered Plague against Elves, you're not going to win the game outright. But you
need more. That's just a time buyer.
But the thing is, like, just like the amount of like the sigh of relief that you're gonna breathe from like casting those permanents is like gigantic. Like, when you draw Warmth against red and you cast it, like, you're like, I'm still
what do you do about the pups that are already in play?
you're like I still gotta work. Like, yeah, they've got pup, they've got Grim Lavamancer, they have Curse Scroll, they can draw Sulfuric Vortex. Like, I still need to work for my wins. And like, if you just like look at other sideboard cards, like, if you have Engineer Plague against Elves and Devourer is just going to create so much space for you to like do your other thing. And then the other thing is that like the burn deck also has avenues to just safely ignore the rest of what your deck does, right? So if your deck has creatures, the burn deck just burns them. If your deck has artifacts, enchantments, like those tend to just like generate some sort, like, there's like Sylvan Library or Oath of Druids. It's just like, okay, well, like, I don't actually have to care if you draw those cards, right? So not only does your like, an elf deck has to fight through like Call the Herd a lot harder than a burn deck. And don't get me wrong, like the Call the Herd can give burn deck some headaches, but like Burn's ability to ignore everything you do aside from your sideboard cards is also super strong. So like, you might be a deck with like a bunch of like B minuses against Elves, but you might be a deck with just like a bunch of Ds against Burn, and you wish you could just sideboard out your entire deck, for like whatever. And then the only decks that are like kind of favored against Burn are decks like Enchantress, which like play the Solitary Confinement card, which like works with the rest of the deck and like is already part of the plan, and they have a lot of ways to find it, and is like super lights out. Yeah.
Trust me on this one.
So that's kind of where you're at. And then that kind of also is the universe where Blue-White Dreadnought and Red-Green Oath, depending on the situation, can be good against Burn.
If Enchantress has a Blood Moon in play, and I like play any of these lands that come into play tapped and Fluctuator, they're a mountain. Did they come into play tapped?
They come into play untapped. They have no abilities, so they come into play untapped. So yeah, you need to be naturally good against Burn. Dreadnought's naturally good against Burn. Red-Green Oath we've discussed this at length, so I don't want to discuss it too much, but one thing that Red-Green Oath does have going for it is that it doesn't have as many dead cards against Burn as other decks, right? So like, the effectiveness of Stone Rain, Zero Resistance is going to vary from game to game, but it's better to have those cards than like nothing, right? It's better to have those cards than Eternal Dragon and Vindicate. Although Vindicate is going to be like whatever, but like Vindicate will be okay. Like, it will be as good as Winter's Grasp, right?
Sphere of Resistance is pretty good.
Yeah, Sphere of Resistance is going to be a lot better.
It's a time buyer. You need Sphere of Resistance and Zernor, basically. You know? Like, If you just have the one, they just pay 2 for their shock and kill you.
Yeah, I mean, you might win. You might win game 1 just by, like the Terravore is also like a good proactive thing to do because like it can come down as a 4/4 or 5/5, and if your life total is high enough, it can take over the game. So you're kind of doing a proactive thing that's good against burn. But then you just like look at the rest of these decks, and it's just like the tier 2 and tier 3 decks is just like they're just gonna they're gonna roll over on in game 1, and with burn specifically, I think goblins is like a little bit more straightforward because like the random mid-range and control decks like have sweepers, they have removal, and like sometimes goblins is just gonna die. Like the contamination deck, even though we went to 3 games and it was really close, the contamination deck like doesn't play a lot of great cards, but the cards it does play just happen to be removal. And it's just like if you're a goblins player and you're just like running into this deck and it's just like all removal and this like infinite chump blocker, it's just kind of like you're gonna have a bad time. So
and sometimes you get them with sick as hell dreams.
Yeah, exactly.
Not really though.
But of course, goblins has a good grindy game. So your opponent does need something to do after they 1-for-1 you. They can't just 1-for-1 you.
You think like cards like Persecute, like your opponent is stockpiling cards in hand because he can't cast them, right? Doesn't Persecute become really powerful?
Well, in the words of BK, you never want to play discard and mana disruption in the same deck because they're accomplishing the same thing.
Interesting. This deck has Duress, Cabal Therapy.
I know. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, the deck plays by
Wasteland and Rishodon 4.
The deck plays by completely different rules, right? Because like the discard isn't there to actually stop your opponent development as much as it is to protect your contamination.
I mean, I'm literally naming a card that would be good in the deck, and like
well, it's
all the cards that would.
It's 4 mana instead of it's 4 mana instead of 1, right? It's 4 mana instead of 1. It's,
yeah, but you're not doing anything with your cards. All you're doing.
You don't even want to have 4 lands in play. I told you, all those lands are precious half of zombie tokens later in the game.
You need to have lands in play to activate your Mistress Factory.
No, you just don't. You don't activate your Mistress Factory until turn 25 after you've generated enough zombie tokens to block to stabilize at 1 life before you can start attacking.
This deck is. I'm sure it is better than we're assessing, but it is just everything about it is wrong.
I mean, I didn't bring it back up, but yeah, good episode on sideboards. Could be great if we planned it. I'm still kind of like mulling over things in my head about some of the topics. Like sideboarding in Grotog is like a different thing. Sideboarding or like we could pretty much run down every deck and like talk about. Like one, like if the sideboard's optimal, but like if it has like a good sideboard, right? Like one of the things about the black-white control deck, or just kind of, or just stuff that Lan was talking about, just like what does your sideboard do? Does it make you a different deck? Or does it just like make you more of a deck? Like he hates the burn sideboard, but
really, I love the burn sideboard.
Well,
you either bring in a bunch of cards that are good against Lanny, or you transform into like this sulfuric vortex price of progress machine.
Well, so the burn sideboard is kind of interesting because the card price of progress is like literally just another burn spell. It's just better than
it's
Incinerate,
really good,
right? Like
it's just like 2 mana deal 6.
But it's not like a sideboard card. It like that it doesn't really fit into a sideboard card that's like it's just like it's like sideboarding in Phyrexian Negator in these black decks, right? It's just like, okay, my deck normally plays a bunch of 2/2s for 2, but now I get a 5/5 for 3 because my opponent doesn't like have a thing for
interacting with the
5/5 for 3. It's just like all you did was just board in like you just
card
upgraded
you played in the main deck.
Yeah, you just upgraded one of the cards that you had. Like Infest is an upgrade to Wrath of God, right? It's just less flexible than Wrath of God, so it just hangs out on the sideboard. Like Disenchant, like is going to be better than Vindicate or Ray of Revelation or Chroma's Vengeance. Maybe it would be better than like whatever. So Black-White Control is a deck that kind of like starts as this like broad tools for everything, and then it just becomes into like better tools. It's really interesting because Rich Shea used to conceptualize the Parfait deck in the opposite. He would start game 1 with all these silver bullets, and then he would just board them out for Gerard's Verdict. Like he was just like, I just need a card. I just need to cut my dead card sometimes, and Gerard's Verdict is perfect for that. And I actually never really understood that, except I just played Deep Analysis in my Parfait sideboard, so I did the exact same thing.
Well, he played Gerard's.
Yeah, he played Gerard's Verdict in the sideboard.
Black-White game 3.
Yeah. Gerard's Verdict.
Really?
Black white discard 2, gain 3. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I really like that card. I just want to make sure I was thinking of the right card.
Yeah. In Parfait, in the Parfait deck that he took to LobsterCon, that like was his stock Parfait list for months. He was just like, one Jar's Verdict in the sideboard, and everyone always mentions him. He's like, why do you have Jar's Verdict? And he's like, well, in game 1 I've got all these situational cards, so in game 2 I'm just boarding out all the situational cards and I'm bringing in less situational cards.
Top 4 to Grand Prix with Necropotence where he had 2 Stupor in the sideboard, and he was explaining a similar thing to me. He's just like, sometimes you just rather have Stupor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is a terrible answer. And he's just like, I'm in the top 4 of the group.
Yeah, he's like,
he also made the
scoreboard.
He made the greatest play that I've ever seen. It was so good. So it's so good. I think I put it at number 1 in the greatest plays of all time. Although the greatest plays of all time was
all Dark Ritual Demonic Constellation plays or whatever.
It was a Dark Ritual Mastercore play, actually.
Yeah, okay. So,
they
all involve either Dark Ritual or Demonic Consultation or both.
A lot of them do, yeah. I think he consulted into the Mastercore, to be fair. But he made this line read that was phenomenal, right? So like the burn deck at the time was designed to beat both the Oath deck and the Necropotence deck. Right? It's had this unique position because it beat both the straight Necropotence deck and the Oath deck, because like it had Price of Progress, etc. Because the Oath's mana base was a disaster, and it could just like side out Jackal Pup or whatever, and then it was just like they sided in Viashino Sandstalkers. So they had Ball Lightning every turn basically. It just doesn't trigger Oath, right? Like so that was really
people
cool.
have thought about that deck for pre-modern.
That was one of the first tools I thought of, borrowing that when I joined pre-modern. It's just the burn deck in pre-modern doesn't have as much mana, like availability for operating mana.
It could,
but it was really good against Oath, right? And then on the other side, it was really good against Necro, right? Because traditionally good burn decks have just always been good against decks that pay life for their their card draw. Right? Figure. Just go figure, right? So Hacker makes this play where he just consults into the Mastercore, leaving open 2 mana to regenerate the Mastercore, and then he just pays for the Mastercore with the cards in his hand. And I'm just like, and he wins, right? And he's just like, yeah, like I just read him for not knowing how Incinerate works. I'm like, right. And that was actually, and he's just like, I looked at this kid and I'm like, he doesn't know how Incinerate works. I'm just going to make this play.
God, that comes up in pre-modern too.
And that kid hilarious. Was JStar LRR, who has 2 Pro Tour top 8s and is a Canadian national champion. And Hacker read him for doesn't know how Incinerate works. And he was right. And that Mastercore did 20 points of damage that game. So.
Love that. They made it easier on the newer players by printing Lightning Strike, which is Incinerate without the trinket text.
Without having to know how Incinerate works, yeah.
We were Phil Wynn was conjecturing. I don't know if you saw this a while back. Somebody played a deck that was both legal in old school and modern.
In modern?
Yeah. So it was old school legal and modern legal. It was because Lightning Bolt, Blood Moon, and Psyblast are all legal and modern. And I don't know what he did with the rest. I think he might have had Flying Men. I think Flying Men might be in the Time Spiral set or something.
It is. Yeah.
So there's that. Yeah. It's time. So it's time. Like he's just playing his blue red Moonburn deck in.
It's horrible in both.
In modern with City of Brass is his only fixing. But Phil Wynn was just like, what's the best deck that you could build with that's modern legal and pre-modern legal? Because it was funny, right? The guy rolled up to his modern, like Thursday Night Modern, and his entire deck is unlimited and alpha beta unlimited, so like alpha beta unlimited and old school border, like none of the cards do what they say they do. This sounds like the greatest
episode of banding ever. This is not, I don't ever remember reading this. By the way, there was supposed to be a 2023 write-up about the meetups, and that has not materialized yet. Well, because there was supposed to be an interview with the meetup leader from 2023.
You can't hassle
whoever that is.
You can't hassle the father of twins.
The twin-born father.
Yeah.
Twin-born.
But people were thinking like, what's I wonder if we could do this except for with pre-modern, especially with some of the reprints that happened in the latest set. And I was just like thinking, that Incinerate hasn't ever been printed into Modern, except for it has. Incinerate was printed in M12. In fact, I have M12 Incinerates. So it's super Modern legal, even though Lightning Strike is also legal. So out of the burn deck, Lightning Bolt is legal. Shock and Seal of Fire are legal. Resist Bobble is not legal, so that's a tough one. Sulfuric Vortex is still not legal, which is just kind of my least favorite thing in the world, that Sulfuric Vortex is legal. But Barbarian Ring did just get printed into Modern, and we have Incinerate, so some of the pieces are there.
Legal.
Yeah, Lava Dart's legal. You can get there. Grim is legal, Mog is legal, and Jackal Pup is legal. So the whole creature, and Ball Lightning is legal. So the whole creature package is legal.
So almost everything is legal. Just
Fire Blast, Curse Scroll, Sulfuric Vortex.
Oh, so the cards that you really want to play.
Oh.
So Fire Blast is not legal.
Yeah. Pyroblast also isn't legal, which is a reasonable reason why Burn is super good. But, we can get there with God knows what. Fork.
Is Mog Salvage legal?
I don't think Mog's out. Or actually, don't you have Time Spiral or not?
I have new printing.
You have Modern Horizons. Modern Horizons 2 Mog Salvage. It's legal.
If they're in Modern Horizons 2, then they're legal.
Yeah, but these days, like blowing up an artifact for 3 is like useless because half of them get regenerated by Welding Jar, and the other half, and all of them cost no mana themselves, and they're just like 0 mana 10/10. So.
I'm just asking if the card is legal.
It is legal
because I assume Overload is not legal. So.
But yeah, let's look ahead to PSS Week 3. I'm going to be playing against Nick Mayo. McLean Denny is going to be playing against Michael Phillips. Michael Flores is going to be playing against Chris DiBiase. We're just keep trading dance partners. This is actually how the last PSS was structured, where the first set of 3 weeks was trading dance partners, and the next set of 3 weeks is trading dance partners. But blah blah blah. And then Mike Harris is playing against
to like a red deck mirror match, and we see who the best man is.
I mean,
do you think you would consent to that?
Let's look at the lists. Chris has 4 Lava Dart. You have 4 Lava Dart. You have 1 main. You might draw the Lava Dart game 1, but you only have 3 Bobble. Oh no, he won't agree because he has 4 Sulfuric Vortex. Yeah.
Do you think he thinks that's enough of a factor? It's 1 card.
Well, he has 4 Vortex at the expense of 1 Shock and an Incinerate, which is losing on your instant speed interaction.
Yeah, those are super medium.
He's also playing an extra Barbarian Ring to you because you only have... Oh, you have 3 rings, 2 scrolls.
I mean, the main difference is I've got a Dart and he has a Sulfuric Vortex. That is meaningfully different, but...
He has an extra bottle. It's a pretty huge difference, right? Like... As much as Dart is an atrocious Magic card to play in the burn deck, it's really good in the mirror. So,
I think he would consent. I think that if I asked him, he would consent.
No, you should play for blood though. It's like
I think that's what the people want to see.
Well, just give it to them in the top 4 or something, because there's a little bit of wanting the.
I'm trying to avoid having to play my rock deck at any point here.
Okay? I mean, I guess what does that leave you with? Like, you could also. I mean, because he might ban burn. Okay, but if we're being realistic, you guys should probably just end up playing the Goblin's Mirror.
I would rather play the Burn Mirror than the Goblin's Mirror.
I know you would rather.
And I think he would also rather play the Burn Mirror than the Goblin's Mirror. I assume I have more experience with the
somebody's more right, though. Somebody's more right. Somebody's read the text on Gem Palm Incinerator.
I'm the one who's read the text on Gem Palm Incinerator. Because Fran was going off in a video. He's like, this deck does not
I know. We don't have to tell the story. We don't have to tell the story.
You read Gem Palm Incinerator? And he's just like, oh. Well, that changes how I should have played.
What would I do? So I'm pretty sure both of you guys are...
I have a huge edge in the Goblin Mirror.
No, like both of you have to ban burn. So,
right, I have 4 Pyrokinesis. He has 2 Pyrokinesis.
Oh, yeah.
He has a Goblin King. I don't. Where he has I have a huge edge.
Oh, well then, I think you're... Wait, no. Oh, because you have no Goblin King, you said?
I have no Goblin King. I mean, he just cannot side the Goblin King in.
Yeah. He can avoid... the Sparksmith is hilarious.
I'm the one who invented Sparksmith, and I'm the one who's not playing it, right? And
oh my God, Sparksmith is really bad in the mirror. It's like the inverse of Priest of Titania. Like, Priest of Titania is nutso. Sparksmith, which is like literally like
is also nutso, but in a different way. Yeah, but he's got he has 4 Incinerator main.
Ooh.
Wow. Okay. I
I'm
thought I was heavy on Incineroar.
I'm pretty confident that Equilibrium is both of you ban Burn, because Burn beats the other two decks. You think that, like, if you're willing to put if you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, you just leave Burn up, and then you invite the Goblins versus Burn match and see if you can win from the Goblin side.
I think I win both. I think I win all three. I think I win Goblins versus Burn Burn versus Goblins, Burn versus Burn. I think I win all of them. However, it doesn't mean I think I win all of them every time.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think, like, if I win it 51% of the time,
well, Mike,
I have to be winning it.
Well,
right?
Mike, as you once said, you get to say things, and then people get to punish you by taking your money. So
that is exactly how I think the world should work. I think that my Goblins deck is hilarious because I have, like, Black Bordered Arabian Nights City of Brass, and also
just one copy.
Just one copy. But then also, like, whatever meme Carflusen Forest.
Well, the bigger question is if you're going to board in Pyrokinesis if you run up against Burn.
Well, I think that if I'm going to play Goblins, I'm playing it against Goblins, not against Burn. But
you're not going to, so you won't leave Burn up.
I don't know. I think I would. I mean,
I'm not gonna. I guess you don't have to leak your bans. I'm saying that if I'm Michael J banning Burn, if I'm Chris banning Burn.
See, that's why I think we should gentlemen's agreement to both play Burn, because I'm probably going to ban Burn because that's Chris's signature deck, not because of matchups. Like, I think, like, Chris probably plays.
I mean, you could
Burn.
also leave Burn and then just try to cast Tempting Worm and see how it goes for you. It's like we put the stupid card in the sideboard. Is your plan to never board it in? Is your plan actually just never to play the Rock? Because that's actually starting to seem really good.
I mean, I really don't want to play the Rock ever. Like, I don't know what I was thinking.
I feel the same. Like, now, like, each week, I'm just like, is this the week for Storm?
No, but it was. I never wanted to play the Rock. It's my safety valve. It's in case everything goes wrong. I have a 50%.
Yeah. It's smart. It's like you're planning to play either Goblins or Burn, and then if you somehow put yourself in a spot where Goblins and Burn are atrocious, then
like if my opponents got Flippy and somehow I couldn't stop them from playing Flippy. Right?
They have double Flippy.
Then I play the Rock, which
they have Flippy and Enchantress. Then you play the Rock.
And the Rock, right? Yeah. But if
they have Flippy Enchantress, then they just ban the Rock. It doesn't work. Mate.
Yeah, this is a disaster. The Rock is so bad. I should have played Red Green Oath and been Team Wooded Foothills.
Yeah, hindsight is 2020. I think your match against Chris is going to be interesting. We won't spoil too much metagaming there because Chris is just going to use that to his advantage, or we're going to get into his head and he's going to get super thrown in a loop.
I'm telling right now, I'm sure that Iron Lungs, who is famous as being a red deck player, plays the red deck at a standard deviation better than he plays two decks he's never played before.
Yeah, this is a true statement.
That's my thought process.
I mean, I'm allowed to leak to you that I banned Burn. Like
right?
That's pretty obvious.
That's my tendency, which is why I'm saying I will gentleman's agreement to play the Burns mirror match if you want. But otherwise, I'm going to ban Burn.
All right, you heard it here first. Chris, you have until Tuesday to respond to Michael J's gentleman's agreement. Michael Phillips versus McLean Denny. Michael Phillips, to remind you, has Red Green Goblins, The Rock, and Enchantress. McLean has Hermit Feb, Contamination, and Blue White Flippy. This one is super interesting because there are 4 decks that I basically just don't know how they 5 decks that I don't know how they interact with each other.
Well, I think that McLean's banning Enchantress and Phillips is banning Hermit Feb, right? That's
if they go with the signature deck idea.
That's what I would do.
But then McLean is forced to play. No, McLean has to ban the Rock because if McLean leaves the Rock, then he's forced to play Contamination, which is horrible against the Rock, and then Blue White Flippy. His list has 3 Exalted Angel, 1 Armageddon.
Oh, Flippy against the Rock's really bad, and Contamination against the Rock is really bad. Also, you're right.
Yeah, so you have to ban the Rock.
No, but Hermit Feb against the Rock is great.
Right, but you would expect that Hermit Feb gets banned because Hermit Feb is also good against Enchantress. All
right, so we're banning the Rock from McLean's side.
McLean bans the Rock. Phillips bans
Hermit Feb,
and then has to rock Enchantress versus either Blue White Flippy or Contamination.
If it's contamination against Enchantress, I think we're going to see contamination victory.
No, well, on ATC, Alvaro said that Enchantress is a really bad matchup.
Oh, I guess they can preempt the contamination lock with a
Seal of Cleansing. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like, and I don't know if there's a Enlightened Tutor in here, but yeah, there's one Enlightened Tutor. There's obviously Sterling Grove. So
Flippy against Enchantress has got to be no picnic. Also, slow beatdown versus infinite card advantage.
Agree, because Flippy has no answers to the card Argothian Enchantress.
I think you have to ban Enchantress, Lanny.
Well, then your opponent plays the rock, and then you still lose.
Well,
then you try to draw Flippy versus the rock.
Flippy versus the rock is really bad for Flippy.
Yeah, but then you just mulligan to Exalted Angel.
Exalted Angel and Armageddon are both really good.
Yeah, it's like
I think I would rather.
You have 4 cards. You have 4 cards in your deck. You have 2 Factor Fiction, 1 Impulse to find it.
I'm just saying. I think I would rather be in that situation than be in a situation where I was playing Contamination against Enchantress.
You're trying to draw a matchup for. You're trying to just draw the matchup for your Flippy deck. So if you ban Enchantress, you're playing Flippy against Rock, and if you ban Rock, then you're playing Flippy against Enchantress.
I think Flippy. I'd rather have Flippy against. Oh, they're so both. It's not a good week.
What do we got on the sideboard? 2 Annul, 1 Exalted Angel. Is Hibernation good against Enchantress? Probably not.
Yeah, sure. You can put all their. You make them hand size.
1 Seal of Cleansing.
Make them hand size. It's okay.
See, but the thing about the Enchantress has an engine and Flippy doesn't. So
it's not good.
Enchantress has an engine and the Rock doesn't. So like, I'm gonna let them have the Rock and hope they wrong half it. And I
just want to reiterate that I said that he should ban Enchantress, and you said no, he'll ban the Rock.
Yeah. I changed my mind. I ignored everything that you said, and I arrived to the conclusion on my own, thanks to no input from you. Smits against Smits against Harris. Smits, to remind the viewers, has Goblins, Red Green Oath, and Blue Black Psychotog. Psychonaut.
Great lineup for Smits.
Yeah, what a freaking great lineup. He did not
really good.
Yeah, he did not come to mess around. Mike Harris, also great lineup. Hermit Feb, Blue White Stifle Knot, and Burn.
Oh wow! My tendency is Feb and Red Green Goblins get banned.
I agree that Harris is definitely on a path to ban Goblins, unless, and this is a big unless, but if Harris believes Michael J, and there's only 2 Zurin Orb in the sideboard of this burn deck, and there are 4 Price of Progress in the sideboard of this burn deck. So sorry, the Oath deck has 2 Zurin Orb. The Burn deck has 4 Price of Progress. Harris might want to draw the Burn versus either Goblins or Red Green Oath matchup. So he could burn Dreadnought. Dreadnought's also good against Hermit Feb. And then even in the world...
But Harris has got a 2 Sulfuric Vortex deck. He's even less Sulfuric Vortex than you're in love with.
Yeah, I didn't say I agree with all of his decisions. I mean, he's playing stock burn. He's playing 4 Urza's Bauble. This is probably 19 lands even.
These are
there's 3 Barbarian Rings. So
two good lineups.
Yeah, but I think Harris could try to draw Burn versus Goblins or Burn versus Red Green Oath, and okay, so this is actually a really sweet. This is an ideal PSS matchup because
anything could get banned.
Yeah. Every matchup we discussed so far, the bans are pretty obvious, but with this one, there's actually 4D chess going on because like Harris is pretty happy to draw Burn versus Goblins or Red Green Oath, but then if Burn gets banned, then he can still be pretty okay with Blue White Stifle Knot against Red Green Oath or Goblins.
I have an alternate thought. What if Harris bans Psychonaut? Look at the matchups. Psychonaut.
No. That's what I'm saying.
Good against Feb, good against Burn, and medium against Blue White Stifle Knot.
Yeah,
In fact, it's probably favored against Blue White Stifle Knot because of the presence of duress.
I would say Psychotog trumps the Mage because like the Mage wouldn't. If the Mage name's Dreadnought, then the Psychotog takes over the battlefield. But the Mage name's like, I don't know, like what would the Mage name? Like Annul, I guess. It's kind of interesting, but like I think that Harris just bans blue black Psychonaut.
Yeah,
Okay. I think it's super obvious because Burn, all three of his decks I think are happy to play Smith's remaining two of Red Green Oath or Red Green Goblins, but Hermit Feb can struggle against Goblins, and Blue White Siphonaut certainly has the potential to lose to Goblins. I have Blue White Siphonaut slightly behind, but
That's
still
not
wins
what
a
your
lot.
testing said. I watched your video. It looked like Siphonaut was crushing Goblins.
No. Then in the video this was like last year, but in the video
The one from last week.
last week.
Didn't you put up a video where you were playing against Tom?
The video of me playing against Tom, Goblins versus Stiflenaut, was posted a year ago. It might have just come on your YouTube feed
come up?
like
Okay,
recently, yeah. But I was ahead and I like punted a match because I didn't like use Rishid import. So I have Goblins ahead. I think it can be a little dicey, obviously, in game one, or just like the Dreadnought always has the nut draw effect, but Goblins is Goblins is just really good at playing the control role. But it's still close.
That's winnable from either side.
Yeah. But and then Feb against Red Green Oath, I have no idea. So
I think that Red Green Oath is favored. I've played this matchup.
okay. So that means
It's winnable from either side, but I have Red Green Oath favored.
that means Smiths should ban Burn and then force Stifle Knot versus either Goblins or a Red Green Oath, which is pretty tight for both.
Yeah, I think that we've gotten to a good spot for this.
Yeah. Okay. And that's
hopefully one or both of them listens to the Spike Colony podcast.
yeah. And then that's me against Mayo. I've got a lot to think about with Mayo. I might just go with ban his good deck, or I might just like try to play some 4D chess. I actually think that this is the 1 week where you could see Storm, but no promises.
I mean, like Storm against Terrageddon is a matchup I would love to see.
I mean, Meddling Mage can Storm definitely struggles against Meddling Mage. I don't think I solved the problem with the bounce in the sideboard, but like
Repulse.
But I do get to ignore like everything else besides Armageddon, and yeah, so it's just Armageddon, Meddling Mage, and sideboard Cataclysm, and then yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking about what people could see.
Well, they'll see all of Nick's deck, hopefully, in the graveyard as he moves into the draw step. So yeah, hype for next week. Once again, twitch.tv, Cloud Go Ranger. If you have some spare shekels, be sure to drop a sub on Hoyp's channel because he pretty much is the bestest.
What about dropping a tip in our Ko-Fi?
You can drop a tip in our coffee.
That?
You can drop a tip in our coffee, but we plug the.
Is it pronounced coffee?
Yeah, it's Buy Me a Coffee. Coffee. Ko-Fi.
Oh, I thought it was. Coffee. I never realized that.
Yeah, no, like the whole website is like buy your favorite people, buy your favorite creators a coffee. Thanks to the people that have supported. Do have to shout out SWB, who's a regular supporter. Phil Quinn dropped some regular support, and we also got some one-on support from the homie Bearded Loki and Wrestlin'. So thanks for supporting all the content, and we do hope to make more. So yeah, if you got some extra shekels, you can drop it on us. You can drop it on Mike Hoyp. You can buy magic cards, whatever. PSS is great. Pre-Modern and Chill is coming up. I believe that is June 29th, but I will confirm.
It is June 29th. I checked this morning.
Yeah, awesome. So June 29th at Endless Life Brewing. On July 20th, just announced the Midwest Pre-Modern Championship. So head over to Misty Mountain Games on July 20th. If you're not in the Midwest area, you can go and check out the Pre-Modern big Win-A-Mox tournament, I think it is, in Temecula, California, also on July 20th. And if you're neither in California nor the Midwest, you can also check out the quarterly over in Massachusetts on July 20th. And I think...
Is that that must be a Duress Crew event? It's
a Duress Crew event. I just don't know which venue they're using, if it's Time Vault or... so New England Pre-Modern Summer Regional. It'll be at Great Stories Game in Whitsville.
When are we going to do the
Massachusetts?
Weren't we supposed to do the Northeast Northeast Regional Championship at Bifrost? Wasn't that on our schedule and we just never did it?
I mean, we like discussed it, but as we kind of talked about last week, it's just so hard to run large scales events. And like, once again, we love Bifrost. Bifrost is the best. The rake is really hard for us to get over to, like, you know, make something a blowout. Like, I don't know how raked it is at Great Stories, or like how raked it is. I mean, Misty funnels a lot more to charity, so they kind of have a different structure, and it's great for them. And we could try to do the same thing.
Also, BK owns the store.
Yeah, BK owns the store, so it's whatever. But like, it's hard for Bifrost to give up a Saturday in prime Flatiron District, Manhattan real estate, for us to just play pre-modern. Like, even at their rake level, it's like they probably still lose money on us playing. So,
do you know what they were charging for the pre-release today? $86.
I mean, it's a premium product. What can you say?
Like, I mean, they could get it. Good for them, right?
Yeah.
You know?
That is a crazy number to say, but I guess back in the day, we paid like 30. We paid 30 for like 6 rounders, and like the winner got half a box. Like back when pre-releases were like 500 people. How big were pre-releases at Neutral Ground?
I don't remember. I have SBDM. I've certainly played in pre-releases that were like 200 people though.
Yeah. I used to play ones that were like in hotels or convention centers, and like there were flights were on demand, 64 players, 6 rounds, $30 entry, but it might have been $60 entry, and then because it's 6 boosters, so 6 Modern Horizons boosters, like plus the pricing, 80 all of a sudden doesn't even sound that bad. But yeah, if you told that to teenage me, I probably would lose my mind. But anyways, be sure to check that out. And any final thoughts, Mike? Learn how to sideboard better. Yeah,
I mean, I think that we had embedded a lot of good content in this one. Really too bad we spent the first hour on the contamination.
People are interested. People needed to know it's like when a black deck starts performing well, you know, you just gotta give it a little attention.
I feel like, is there really a real reason why you just can't play like a mono black control deck with like mostly Odyssey block cards? Like, it seems to me like
probably because everyone who has loses a lot. I think that's the
reason.
Don't
know. Not since I've been playing the format has anyone really tried, right? So maybe this is like a pre-Michael.
I mean, that you're aware of, but I've seen people try. Like, I've seen people play mono black control, and in fact, it made the top 8 of one of the Magic the Gathering online challenges. But it definitely doesn't have a settled list, and it definitely, you know, like, as much as people have tried, it is definitely the case that it feels like there's still a lot of potential, like, untapped potential.
I would have that deck certainly ahead, like, of
Contamination.
No, of like Blue-Green Madness, right? Like, I think it would be better than Blue-Green Madness Heads Up. I think it would be better than Flippy Heads Up.
It would be really bad against Replenish. It probably would still lose to Burn.
I didn't say Burn.
It probably would be good against Goblins, and it probably would be good against Blue-White Dreadnought, and it could be conceivably good against Red-Green Oath, but then maybe it's just like,
I don't know. It's
not
probably
better than
not great against Red-Green Oath.
If you just play 30 lands, you're good, right? Because you don't have any creatures. You don't trigger. Oh, but then your opponent can have Call the Herd. Anyways, Roar the Elephants, Call the Herd. Spike Colony would love to hear your mono black deck ideas. But until then, be sure to check out the PSS. And we love you. Love Spike Colony.
Love Mike. All right.
Game over.